across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Julia. She's back tomorrow, of course. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense. Lots to get through, of course. Keir Starmer and Israel blasting the BBC over Bob Villan's Glastonbury chance of death to the IDF. Officials have called it hate speech and police are investigating. Here's a very simple question. What is the line between free speech and hate speech? Genuinely love investigating. You find yourself in all sorts of cul-de-sacs when you think you've modified a good, unarguable position. Somebody comes along and counters it. We'll ask that question this afternoon. Also, Keir Starmer is urging MPs to support disability benefit cuts. Still facing a rebellion from around about 50 of his own backbenchers. He must choose between removing the whip or risking further damage to his authority. Can he pull it off is the big question. And it's the biggest tennis tournament on the planet. Wimbledon kicks off today. 23 British players in the singles. That's the highest amount of Brits since 1984. Players, it won't look like that in the last 16, I promise you. Players and fans are facing scorching heat with temperatures currently at 29.7 degrees being recorded. The hottest start to Wimbledon on record. And it's going to get hotter. If you're playing on centre court, you better have a lot of practice playing in extreme heat. Regardless of where you're from in the world, it's going to be hot over there on the grass. More, and we're live in Wimbledon a little later. 0344 499 1000. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news. Now, while you're sitting there burning up like a lizard, working out ways to keep cool right now and stay alive, we will bring you some sanity and we will bring you common sense. We've got backstage passes for all the big subjects here. You don't need to be standing in the middle of a field to get the real stories and good common sense opinion. That is how we roll. There's no showboating here. Virtue signalling is frowned upon and synthetic indignation is given the red card. Just cool, straight talking. And if all goes well, your sweaty brow will be calmed over the next 3 hours. Or will it? Because some of this stuff is going to really, inevitably, test every sinew of your patience and potentially see temperatures rise. But stay with me on this. This is the only place where you can be sure for a dose of truth, pragmatism and some sound reasoning that will hopefully do the job. Even when we mention the band Bob Villan, an unlikely pair of chancers from Ipswich. Now, before you make any judgment, by the way, on the story, you have to realise that this pair of bozos are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. I mean, look at where Wikipedia does not throw up any reference to their heady days at Oxbridge, not even a spell at Bromley Tech. You'll get none of it. You won't be seeing them on Mastermind anytime soon. So bear that in mind. And look, I get it, okay, it's music. None of that matters to some. Some of our finest artists that made it to the very top of their field were never people that were perhaps educated in the conventional sense. So I understand that people's talents can manifest in different ways, but you sort of hope with bands, you hope for a bit of kind of sort of inner wisdom. If you take the Sex Pistols, and apparently the Pistols are the idols of Bob Villan, then there was a sort of an inner wisdom around Sid and the boys. It kind of worked on that level, and for that reason, people bought into the whole thing. So I understand that. A bit of inner wisdom, an antenna for logic, and maybe even a bit of decency along the way as well. But not this pair of unlikely bozos. They took to the stage at Glastonbury and spewed their last remaining brain cell onto an unsuspecting and ultimately gullible crowd. Folk that couldn't point to Gaza on a map. They couldn't tell you what the acronym IDF stood for, but they all joined in that well-played game of anti-Semitic bingo. And it was a full house all round, from rivers to seas to the call for the free Palestine. Doesn't exist, by the way. The chanting can be heard as far as Michael Eavis's mansion. That's how far socialism travelled. But Bob and Bobby did go one step further than most, maybe. Yeah, calling for thousands of Jews to be killed. It's kind of like a little tear up from what you might call your conventional political music festival rant. And we've seen many over the years. Even the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has condemned this, and also particularly the BBC, for this death to the Israeli troops in what he called an appalling hate crime, hate speech. Glastonbury Festival organisers have also said they were appalled after the frontman, Bobby Villain. They're both called Bobby, by the way. One's Bob, one's Bobby. And that's not their real name, and I don't think they're really brothers. But anyway, you take the point. So death to the IDF, we got all of that stuff. In a statement, Keir Starmer said the BBC had questions to answer on this, and the BBC had previously said some of the comments were deeply offensive, adding that it had issued a warning on screen about very strong and discriminatory language. Where else would the BBC fess up to there's going to be some discriminatory language, but we're going to let it go anyway? I'm just interested by that. Keir criticised Kneecap as well. I mean, Kneecap look like some kind of boy band right now, don't they? Compared to these characters. Kneecap, he said their appearance was not appropriate. He said there's no excuse for this kind of appalling hate speech. And of course, in the last 90 minutes, the BBC has said it should have cut away from the live broadcast of Bob Villain's performance. So there it all is. We know the story well. Very simple question. What is the line between free speech and hate speech? Yeah, there's a lot of people suggesting these guys should be in the slammer, like Lucy Connolly is in the slammer. I would draw your attention to one obvious sort of vague contradiction in that. If you are agitating that Lucy Connolly should not be in jail, and I think we can all agree she shouldn't be in jail. Some of us have different reasons for that. But if we agree she shouldn't be in jail, then I suppose you'd have to advocate that these guys also shouldn't be in jail. There is a police investigation. We will see what happens, but don't hold your breath. Where is the line between free speech and hate speech? Because there is a school of thought that says, you say whatever you like, mate. You know, it's up to you, isn't it? Well, what sort of world do we live in when you can't say stuff? Unless there is a direct and very specific, and this is the fine line of a direct and very specific, demonstrable example that what you are saying could be acted upon, then it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They haven't committed a crime. Could realistically people start going around killing the idea? Probably not. But you take the point. It's incredibly offensive stuff. It's total racism. And there it was, broadcast loud and proud on the BBC. And somebody at the BBC would have gone, well, this is called art, isn't it? Yeah, with a capital F, mate. We'll have more of that from you in a moment. Where is the line between free speech and hate speech? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. We have Simon Danchuk back with us. Simon, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with you.
Nice to have you with us as ever. So Keir Starmer has waded into this one, blasting the BBC for their decision to air Bob Villain's chance against... It's got Dylan written down here. Bob Villain's chance against calling for the death of the IDF at Glastonbury. Let's have a listen to this horrific performance just to remind you what this was all about.
Death, death to the IDF! 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 Hell yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine must be, will be, inshallah, it will be free.
Yeah. He's obviously a grade A idiot. I mean, what is it going to be free from? I mean, seriously, really? You know, you think if Hamas got everything they wanted, Simon, then suddenly the Palestinian people would be free. I mean, it's an absolute vacuous piece of nonsense from these characters. And, of course, it's caused a hell of a row.
Yeah, it certainly has, and understandably so. I mean, the first point is these guys are completely talentless, aren't they? I've been to Glastonbury, I've been to the Reading Festival a few times. Over the years, I've been to, I've seen lots of bands play and stuff. But these guys are all absolutely talentless. Why would you have them on at the festival? In the first place, if you read some of the lyrics to some of the songs, you see some of the performances, you can only conclude that they're not very good. You mentioned the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
Johnny Lydon had a lot of talent. Let's be honest,
100%.
But these guys just don't have any talent.
These are not the Pistols. And do you know my barometer on this? Our producer, Corn-Fed Finn, who is on the desk today, Now, Finn knows his popular culture, OK? Whether you're talking about comedians, whether you're talking about new band, I mean, he knows stuff, you know, he's that kind of... In another world, he'd be the arts correspondent on Newsnight, but hey, he ended up with us. Even he hadn't heard of them. So if Finn hasn't heard, that's good enough for me. That's the litmus test of whether this pair of characters were worth even seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even think they should have been on at the festival. I mean, just based on their talent. And I do wonder whether they've been put on there just to provoke and raise some profile for the festival itself. But one of the key culprits here is the BBC. If those bands had been saying anti-Islamic comments or far-right comments, they would have pulled the plug on that performance in double quick time.
100%.
No
100%, yeah.
But classic BBC, always on the wrong side, yet again. And they've got questions to answer yet again. The position the BBC is in politically, I find astonishing, really. They're losing viewers hand over fist. They're promoting this sort of stuff. They're always on the wrong side of the argument. I think they're a real culprit in all of this. You raised the bigger point about free speech. I'm all in favour of free speech. But there is this double standard, isn't there? Where, as you've pointed out, you've got Lucy Connolly made some stupid, daft comments in the run-up to the Southport riots last year. And she's doing a lot of time for it.
Yeah.
Whereas you have performers like this, who, let's see what the police do. But if they don't get prosecuted, as Lucy Connolly has, and if they don't serve time like Lucy Connolly has, the only conclusion you can reach is that we have a two-tier justice system.
Yeah, this is going to do... I mean, they were in many respects... I'm not going to claim this observation as my own. I think many people simultaneously thought the same thing. But they've kind of formed the best sort of recruitment drive for parties like Reform UK, who are the only party that have been brutally honest to say this is this kind of nonsense, this kind of strange contradictory justice that we have, we are going to deal with, because no one else is talking about it.
No, that's absolutely right. And Richard Tice MP, the deputy leader of Reform, to his credit, has really come out in favour and in support of Lucy Connolly. I think I'm right in saying that he's actually visited her
he has,
in prison. Yeah, and that's admirable, because what we don't want is people, you know, at the drop of a hat being in prison for saying the wrong thing on social media. She took it down after a couple of hours. I mean, that's the reality of it. And then you've got a national broadcaster putting out anti-Semitic messages like this, not for a few minutes, for 40 minutes to the public. I mean, this begs significant questions in terms of where Britain is at. These performers have no regard for Britain. That's the reality of it.
There would have been, you know, people in the BBC. I mean, I'm sure there was at least one producer sitting there when they started this chanting stuff, whose laundry bill probably shot up about threefold the minute they started chanting this. But there were probably others there going, no, this is their art. It's their politics. It's, you know, they've got a right to make a statement.
Yeah, they're trying to be with it, perhaps. I don't know. But come on, you've worked in broadcasting much longer than I have. You as in terms of producers, you're anticipating something going wrong during the broadcast.
Yeah.
Now, they would have known who was on the billing at this concert. They would know the background to these people. By name, if nothing else,
sure.
Bob Dylan. I mean, Bob Dylan is a Jewish performer, and these guys clearly have an issue with Jewish people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about it.
And of course, the big irony in all of this, or the grim reality, maybe I should say, Simon, and again, lots of people picked up on this, the fact that, you know, what is happening in Israel, of course, all happened and began at a music festival, and the very same kind of backdrop was used to make these comments, kind of almost doubles up the offence here and the grim reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And the audience itself really need to take a hard look in the mirror, really, chanting along to some of these comments that the performers are making. I mean, they wouldn't last 2 minutes if Hamas were running the country. That's for sure.
That's right.
They really need to think.
Do these people know what they're asking for? I mean, have they got any idea when they start chanting this stuff? Free it from what to what? This is the curious element that nobody on that side of the argument ever wants to debate. This is not there's no freedom for Palestinian people.
No, absolutely. I've been out to the West Bank on 2 occasions over the years and met many Palestinian people. It's a very complex issue, and you can't help but think that the audience who's engaging with this and going along with it really do not understand what's going on at all. No, I mean, it's very complex. There's no doubt about that.
Simon, stay with us. Lots more to come. That extraordinary story as well of the Sun reporter. This was Thomas Godfrey, who posed as a Channel migrant to get a job with a food delivery company. Unbelievable stuff. We'll look at that. The latest on AI software, that's going to places. And the heat wave, of course. We're Brits. We can't avoid talking about the weather, can we, for goodness sake? And that question, where is the line between free speech and hate speech? 0344 499 1000.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 21 minutes after 1 o'clock. We've got Simon Danchuk with us, looking at the big stories of the day. Always good to have Simon with us. And this one, let's look at this story. Extraordinary goings on over there at the fast food delivery companies. And this one, I think, probably gives us maybe the greatest example that the world has gone mad. Sun reporter Thomas Godfrey posed as a Channel migrant in order to get a Just Eats account and make food deliveries, all whilst technically having no right to work in the UK. Have a look at this.
Because I am not the person who owns this Just Eat account. In fact, as far as the person who owns the account thinks I am a channel migrant. They will be expecting someone called Daniel. I'm not, I'm Thomas, and I'm going to ask them how they feel about that.
Hi,
I've got a drop off here for Rebecca.
Yes, perfect, thank you.
What did you order? What did you go for?
Wimpy.
Ah, superb.
Yeah.
People are coming over illegally from France and then working as Just Eat Deliveroo drivers, and then they can go around London, Surrey, wherever, just dropping off people's orders despite having no right to work.
No,
I mean, how do you feel about that?
No, that makes me a bit nervous now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a great journalistic work from Thomas over there at The Sun on this one, Simon. A couple of takeaways from this before we get into the nitty-gritty. The woman ordered a Wimpy.
Yeah.
When was the last time anybody... I didn't even know you could order a Wimpy. All I knew, the greatest thing on the menu at a Wimpy, of course, was a bender and chips. And you can only imagine as a 14-year-old how hilarious that was.
Well, I always enjoyed the Knickerbocker glue.
Yeah, indeed. This was like the menu full of double entendres, it seems. I think we might have just lost Simon at that point. On the mention of bender and chips, he froze and was never seen again. We'll get Simon Danchuk back up with us. So illegal migrants reportedly renting we talked about this last week, renting Just Eat accounts via social media to work as delivery drivers unlawfully. I mean, Simon, you would think by now we've got Simon back, somebody would be on the case with this, particularly the people that own Just Eats and Deliveroo.
Yeah, the Sun have done excellent work investigating this issue, and it's run for a couple of days now, quite rightly. But the action or inaction from government and from the delivery companies themselves is absolutely incredible. I think the story broke about a week ago showing that illegal migrants were doing delivery jobs, which they're not entitled to do. Illegal immigrants aren't allowed to work, in actual fact. And yet they're doing these delivery jobs, impersonating other people, and it's all being run by, I would suspect, undesirable people. And yet the delivery companies don't seem to care about it. And we now, I think it's today, that the minister has called these companies into the department, into the Home Office, to answer questions about it. They should have thrown the book at these companies. One can't help but think that it's part of these companies' business model to keep costs down.
You do wonder, don't you? And I would just throw a £10 million fine at, Just Eats and Deliveroo and go, right, that's our starting position, 10 million quid, hand it over now, otherwise you've got no licence to work here at all. It's that serious, right?
Oh, it is that serious. This is like the Wild West. It's completely unregulated. And mark my words, it's only a matter of time before one of these illegal immigrants does something really awful and disastrous, attacks somebody or something like that, because it's not properly regulated. And then the ministers, the Labour ministers, will have real questions to answer.
Yeah, indeed. Let's look at welfare reform. Keir Starmer has, headed off a bit of a rebellion, but there's still about 50 Labour MPs who are not happy. This could still be a massive headache for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, the Prime Minister's had real difficulty over this, and it's a mess. I mean, everybody in politics and government would accept that we have to have some radical welfare reform. But all the government has tried to do, Starmer and Rachel Reeves, is to just bring the bill down. And that's not sophisticated enough. With far too many people claiming benefits. And some of this is from the pandemic era, where meeting the claimant changed to telephoning the claimant, so they're not meeting them in person. Reassessments aren't being done. Spot checks aren't being done on the claimants. And then we've got to a stage where it's something like 1 in 10 of working age people are claiming disability benefits. There can't be that many people in Britain who really should be on these benefits. And so we do need action, but their approach to it has been completely wrong. It's a real mess, no doubt about that.
100%. Just a quick one on AI software. Ever since AI software ChatGPT launched, entry-level jobs have fallen by a third, which is extraordinary, just to show how technology, the machines, are taking over. Here's a question. Why can't our government be as reassuring as J.D. Vance over in the States? Have a listen to him.
This administration wants to be very clear about one last point. We will always center American workers in our AI policy. We refuse to view AI as a purely disruptive technology that will inevitably automate away our labor force. We believe, and we will fight for policies that ensure that AI is going to make our workers more productive, and we expect that they will reap the rewards with higher wages, better benefits, and safer and more prosperous communities.
Now, it's very reassuring to hear that, Simon. Some say he hasn't got a chance of that happening, and good examples over here. BT planning to replace 10,000 jobs with AI by 2030, including call handling, network diagnostic roles and all the rest. So when you call, it's bad enough already calling a call centre, but you won't know whether you're talking to Arthur, Martha or a robot, for goodness sake. It's taking over, and apparently entry-level job openings have dropped by 31.9% since AI really began to take off. And remember, we're only at sort of first base with AI at the moment.
It's completely true. I've advised a couple of AI businesses over the last few years, and this is coming around the corner. I mean, this is really impressive technology. And I'm not surprised that entry-level jobs are reducing. I mean, you look at content moderation, where, stuff on social media is restricted. It used to be taken down by humans in call centers, as you mentioned. Now that can be done by AI. I do some market research. All the transcription of interviews used to be done physically. Now it's done by AI. So there's lots of examples where AI is being used, and the speed with which it's developing is phenomenal. Yeah. It's reassuring that you have an American vice president talking reassuringly about it. I think we need to see something similar in the UK. So we need to be upskilling people so that they can do different jobs to what these are being replaced by.
Indeed. Final word on the heat wave. It's day 4. It's not everywhere. We know that, it's 34, 35, peaking apparently as we enter the 4th day. Greater London and Bedfordshire could experience one of the hottest Junes on record. That was 1976, 35.6 degrees. There are areas, parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland remain cooler, temperatures between 17 and 22 with some rain. But nonetheless, if you are in the hot spot, it is darn hot, Simon.
It's hot out there. I was out earlier this morning. I'm going out straight after this, and there's certainly no need for a jacket, certainly in central London. But, so the net zero fanatics will be saying this is global warming.
Yeah.
As you point out, the hottest temperature was in 1976 when I was 10 years old, and that's quite some considerable time away.
Yeah, no, I remember it too. And also, nobody back then it was just called a hot summer, wasn't it? That was it. It's a hot summer. Nobody said, the planet is dying and, we've got to somehow eradicate your lifestyle and make your bills more expensive to deal with it. We just went, it's summer, it's hot, and that was it.
Yeah, and I don't think we even had the suntan lotion. You just play out
that's true.
And come back in red as a beetroot after a couple of days,
Indeed. Listen, Simon, always good to have you on. Thank you for that. Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP, now Reform UK member. That's a good point about the sun cream. Sometimes it went on, sometimes it didn't. At the weekend, I've pretty much got a Nerf gun full of Factor 50 that I'm just shooting over the kids as they play in the garden or jump in the swimming pool, etc. When I say swimming pool, that should read like paddling pool, but you take my point. Yeah, you wouldn't think of get the hats on, kids, make sure you got the cream on. I'm pretty sure it's not new, and I do remember my mum putting sun cream on my face and hating it because you could, it went near your lips and near your eyes and it was horrible. But now, correctly, by the way, when it comes to sun cream, slap it on. And rightly so. We'll have more on the weather because, of course, it's going to affect one of the biggest sporting events on the planet. That is Wimbledon. It starts today. Wimbledon, a load of Brits taking part. Good luck to every single one of them. Not sure everyone's going to make it into the quarters, frankly, but there's some hopes there. But, of course, centre court, 35, 36 degrees. That is hot. Even if you're from a country, and remember, most good pro tennis players have they didn't train here. Andy Murray didn't train in Bristol. You know, he trained in Spain and places like that, because you've got to get used to it. But even by that standard of getting used to it, I think there's a level, and they might be tested today on day one of Wimbledon, where they're live a little later. Back to your calls and comments as well in a few moments. Where is the line between free speech and hate speech? More of that on the way. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
comes from Leon. It says, great summarisation, thank you. Surely it is incitement of violence. It could have been an imminent threat, because a lot of IDF soldiers are Jewish conscripts called up when needed. So there could have been Jews in the audience who have fought or could fight in the future, and therefore they were under threat at the time this idiot was shouting death to the IDF. That's a really good point. This, of course, is the story of Israel now criticising the BBC over Bob Vylan's Glastonbury chants. Death to the IDF. Officials called it hate speech. Police are investigating. The BBC admitted it should have pulled the live stream, calling the comments utterly unacceptable and anti-Semitic. Ofcom said it was very concerned and that the BBC clearly has questions to answer. The US has also said it may revoke Bob Vylan's visas as they approach an up-and-coming US tour. Really? An up-and-coming US tour? Are they for real? In a moment, we'll talk to Laurie Westall from The Daily Sceptic. First, Daniel Burke, Director of UK Lawyers for Israel. Daniel, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Isn't it funny how a story that, if we'd have been talking on Friday, we couldn't have imagined that this would be what we'd be talking about on Monday. A couple of chancers no one's ever heard of decide to go all racist on a stage at a music festival. That's not insignificant to this story, of course, for obvious reasons. But here we are. And the question, of course, that many are asking is, very simply, did this band break the law?
Well, let me start with this. I don't agree with you that this wasn't expected. Large numbers of Jewish people chose to stay away from Glastonbury this year. A lot saw it coming. Mm-hmm. And the irony is clearly not lost on you. I know your comment a moment ago. Almost 400 Israeli festival goers were murdered at the Nova Festival on the 7th of October 23. Yeah. And here we have festival goers in England chanting for the murder of Israelis. And yet somehow this crowd of tens of thousands chanting along with calls of death, death to the IDF, and the genocidal chants from the river to the sea just went along with it. And when someone stands on a stage in front of a mob shouting death to anything as they cheer along, that's a sign that something is dreadfully wrong.
100%.
It's often said that Jews are the canary down the mine. But for Jews in Britain, and for anyone that's taken a moment to study the rise of hateful movements, this was no different to a Nazi rally in the 30s. And then, of course, we also had Kneecap, who had previously held up a Hezbollah flag and shouted "Up Hamas, up Hezbollah" at a gig at the O2 Forum last November. Serious criminal offences under the Terrorism Act. Well, there can be no excuse of ignorance amongst these cheering crowds about how violent Hamas are, because they live stream their atrocities of rape and murder and kidnap. But still, they stood before them and they cheered kneecap, and they charged Bob Villan, whose real name is Pascal Robinson Foster, who's from Ipswich. And who do they call on to kill the IDF? I presume it's not the audience at Glastonbury, because they don't really fancy their chances. So, you know, they're talking about Hezbollah, the Houthi, the Iranian regime, Hamas, subjugators of women, murderers of gay people, opponents of music, opponents of free speech. Have they committed offences? Well, Mr. Robinson Foster has been reported by my organisation, UK Lawyers for Israel, for breaching Section 5 of the Public Order Act 1986 because he's used threatening and abusive words and behaviour within the hearing or sight of people likely to be caused harassment, alarm and distress. And he may have also breached Section 18 of the Public Order Act by using threatening, abusive words and having regard to the circumstances that racial hatred was likely to have been stirred up. Because, being no doubt here, death to the IDF means death of Jews. Yeah. Yes, the soldiers of the IDF are mainly Jewish, not exclusively. There are Muslims in the IDF, there are Druze, there are Christians, and there are people who are entirely irreligious, defending the only Jewish state in the world, which itself was reborn from the ashes of the Holocaust.
Indeed. And I made this very point at the beginning. I mean, this was sort of anti-Semitic bingo, and they got a full house over there at Glastonbury this weekend. I mean, it was incredible to watch, and incredible to see it given such a sort of free pass. I think the audience were kind of probably slightly sheepish on this and followed a chant. Half of them wouldn't have a flipping clue, you know, where Gaza was on a map, or you know what the IDF even stood for that matter. But I'm not allowing that to go unchecked. I'm merely making the point that this is the sort of danger of people standing up there with a platform, because you can almost, you know, have this hypnotic effect on the masses.
And we've seen that through history, and I think the words of Mark Twain have never been so true. When you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. Yeah. But let's also perhaps consider the complicity of the BBC in this. And I use the word complicity intentionally, because they chose to screen this. Experienced operators sat in the control room, and not one producer said, cut the cameras. Yeah. When the words death to the IDF came out, they didn't switch to any of the other acts that were on. They didn't cut it. They didn't apologise, as perhaps they would have done if somebody had sworn on primetime TV. They let it run. And they let it run so that the echo of the mindless mob of these sheep could also be heard. Yeah. And they've said afterwards they had a trigger warning, you know, may contain flashing lights, may cause Jew hatred. But the BBC has been complicit in propagating anti-Jewish hatred. The independent Assassin report, which I know was covered on your programme some time ago, identified over 1,500 breaches of the BBC's own guidelines. And it's who watches the Watchmen, because they do make their own decisions as to whether or not they've breached it. And these range from falsely claiming that Israeli missiles had hit the Al-Ahli hospital when in fact it was a misfired Hamas rocket, to paying something like £400,000 of public funds to produce a documentary that was narrated by the son of a Hamas leader. They've even had a member of BBC Arabic who was involved in the October the 7th attacks. Now we see with their comment that this was, quote, deeply offensive, further evidence of the BBC allowing damage to be done and then applying a small sticking plaster.
100%. And as you rightly said, although, you know, I said at the beginning, we might not have been able to envisage this specific conversation if we were talking on Friday, but you're absolutely right on this, Daniel. Of all the years that something like this might happen, this was going to be the one. There was never, ever any doubt that, I mean, certainly you had this outfit called Kneecap that were booked, so they knew in advance there was going to be some sort of issue, but they also knew that other acts in that kind of arty world of millionaire socialism would probably take them down that avenue. So the BBC have no excuse to say we couldn't have known, because everybody knew.
They will have done their research on Pascal Robinson Foster, or Villain as he likes to be called. They obviously did their research on Kneecap. It doesn't take much with Kneecap. I mean, they're named after the punishments meted out by the IRA. So they knew there was a real possibility of this. And of course, we can't ignore the fact the BBC are largely funding this. In fact, to put that better, we as licence payers are funding this, because the BBC pay lots of money to Glastonbury. They won't disclose how much, but they pay lots of money to Glastonbury each year as part of their 6-year deal to cover this. But the net effect of this is it is making not just that festival, but it's making Britain a very scary place for Jewish people.
Yeah.
And that's always a very, very bad sign. And we all believe strongly in freedom of speech. It's the cornerstone of a democracy. But there's a point where a line is crossed. Perhaps one of the most famous cases on free speech, the case of Redmond Bay, which is to do with a preacher at Speaker's Corner. And in that case, Lord Justice Sedley said that freedom of speech includes the offensive, it includes the provocative, it includes the heretical, it includes the outrageous. Freedom of speech, only to speak inoffensively, isn't worth having as long as it doesn't tend to provoke violence.
Yeah.
And when you start sentences with death to, you intend to provoke violence.
Absolutely, 100%. Listen, Daniel, it's been a real pleasure to have you on. Very informative stuff as well. Thank you, Daniel Burke, for the legal side. He's Director of UK Lawyers for Israel. Let's get a word from Laurie Westall, who is the Associate Editor of the Daily Skeptic. Afternoon to you, Laurie. And again, just to sort of pick up on the point that I was talking to Daniel about, we would have had some idea that, you know, there's going to be artists doing this Free Palestine thing and Rivers to maybe, because we had a bit of it last year. But this took it to perhaps a level that surprised many of us. This was another territory, if you like.
Well, I certainly agree with you there. Yeah, I do agree with pretty much every single thing Daniel said in his remarks. You know, it's very disturbing for British Jews to hear these kinds of remarks. You know, the BBC has serious questions to answer over why they allowed this to go ahead. But nevertheless, you know, I'm here to put the case for free speech, and I will do, because I think it's important. I actually even agree with Daniel that under our law as it presently exists, namely the Public Order Act 1986, that this was probably, or could certainly be considered criminal in that it was stirring up racial hatred. But I think actually really there is a problem with that law as it's constituted, because what we don't have in Britain is the same understanding of free speech law as they do in America, which is not only that it's intended to stir up these kinds of emotions, but that it's likely to stir up imminent lawless violence. And I think that's the key question. Yeah. Now, there was a remark Daniel made earlier, which is that who was that chant directed to? Well, it wasn't really the audience, was it? They were not going to be expected to go out and kill the IDF. It was, you know, these battles are happening in the Middle East. It was to Hezbollah, supposedly, or Hamas. But, you know, I don't think that Hamas, you know, themselves burning with a genocidal hatred of Jews already, are really going to be listening to these, you know, mouth-breathing lefties in a field in Somerset. Frankly, they already hate the Jews quite enough.
Yes.
So I think that and of course this offence we prosecuted under the Public Order Act in Britain, which is to say that it's a domestic crime. So I don't think that crucial threshold that they would have in America of imminent lawless violence has actually been met.
I mean, it's fascinated me, and I know you as well, Laurie, in this respect, that line between free speech and what's called hate speech. I'm normally resistant to the term hate speech because it so often, it seems, is used simply as a tool to throw back at people for opinions they don't agree with, which is mostly how we see that kind of articulated these days. But it is nonetheless, there is an interesting line there, right? Hate speech or illegal speech and free speech.
Indeed. And I mean, there's been a tendency recently to believe basically that speech is a form of violence and can be, and this is really bound up in this idea of hate speech, and this is in really the Public Order Act, these concerns of stirring up distress or alarm and various other concerns. And this really, to broaden this out, of course, many people have compared this with the case of Lucy Connolly, who, of course, got 31 months for an errant tweet, which she said after the Southport massacre. And, you know, the question is, well, why, if the police don't go after Bob Villan in this way, you know, why do they go after her? Yeah. But really, we should disaggregate nasty and even hateful speech from speech that is actually likely to cause something to happen. Because in this case, yes, it was nasty. Yes, those people in that field should be ashamed of themselves. But I don't actually think that it was likely to cause an imminent.
And is that the difference or the distinguishing factor here, that the Lucy Connolly tweet, and clearly, you know, I don't believe for one second that she really meant that, and it wasn't a direct call to action. She was musing, as it were, you know, exasperation, and then realised she'd been an idiot and took it down. But the judge, I would imagine, would argue, or some would argue, that actually her tweet could have been acted upon.
Well, actually, really the key thing it came down to, and probably would come down to in this case, would not be that, but would be this clause of whether it was intended to incite serious violence. Yep. And this is really a sort of legally grey area in many ways, because what it requires is for the state essentially to peer into your thoughts and see what you were thinking when you made this remark. And this is really something would be good to get away from as a society, because really it's thought policing, and you know, we should simply be looking at the act from a much more neutral point of view and saying, is it likely to cause violence? If not, then we may detest it, we may think it's a reprehensible remark, but nevertheless, you know, it shouldn't be coming into contact with a criminal law. And that's not to say, by the way, that people shouldn't, you know, call these people out for, you know, the vile anti-Semites they are. And also, by the way, they made other remarks, you know, about, you know, celebrating essentially demographic change in Britain and you know, how they were, you know, saying we've taken your country over essentially. So that these are really nasty people, and absolutely call them out, you know, take them off air. The BBC should have done that. But yeah, they shouldn't be having their collars felt by the police.
Laurie, great stuff. Thank you for being on with us. Laurie Westall, who is the Associate Editor at The Daily Skeptic. By the way, what kind of punk band dresses up as tennis players? I don't know whether that... When I first saw that, I thought it was some kind of nod to Wimbledon starting on Monday. I thought, oh, I see what someone's doing here. They're kind of... It's a mash-up between the music festival and the tennis festival. A little bit of a nod to SW, whatever it is down there. 19 0344 499 1000. Where is the line between free speech and hate speech? It's an interesting one. You heard it there. People will create different arguments on this. I mentioned there to Laurie, people will say, well, Lucy Connolly's tweet, this was, I think, the part of the legal thing. She was thinking violence, and it could have, this is again about lengthy prison sentences during heightened times of disturbance, although she wrote it beforehand, it could have contributed to that. I think that's the central accusation. I don't imagine it really would have done, would it? I mean, would anybody be stupid enough to have seen a tweet and then go, I think I'll set fire to something? As for Bob Villan, they wouldn't know vinyl if it bit them. As for Bob Villan, where does that leave us in terms of free speech and hate speech? I mean, demonstrably, this was horrific. Should they be in jail? Should they be given a tap on the wrist? I can't imagine anyone's going to, you know, be giving them any great big bookings after this. Thoughts to you? 0344 499 1000.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. By the way, so Bob Villain is it's a band, not a person. Both characters in the band are called Bob, or one's Bob and one's Bobby. Not their real names, by the way. So yeah, it's in the same way we were just talking that Blondie is a band, not an individual. And by the way, factoid for you, Debbie Harry is 80 tomorrow. 80 tomorrow, which is a bit rough considering that when I was 15, I penciled it in my head that I was going to marry her. So I don't know how that kind of worked out. Time moves on fairly swiftly, it seems. Let's go to your calls and comments. Jez in Sussex says the police need to make an example of that Bob Villain moron. I mean, let's be honest here. He can't even pronounce death. He says deaf to the IDF. The bloke is a literate moron and should be banged up, says Jez in Sussex. We want judges like Jez. That's what we want. Apparently his talent agent, there's no gag there, he has a talent agent. Their talent agent has dropped them, so we're hearing. Jill's in Cornwall on this free speech, hate speech thing. What have you got for us, Jill? Good afternoon.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I'm just horrified. To be perfectly honest, it's so hypocritical of this government to sort of stand by and criticise the BBC when they've enforced the law and the police. I'm not happy with them either. The fact that they've enforced a situation where you can't put a thought on the internet where you are unhappy with something and you might want to be critical and the rest of it, and without somebody picks you up and throws you in prison for 2 years. I mean, it's disgusting, absolutely disgusting that this bunch of idiots, numpties...
They are overseeing, and this is the kind of the uncomfortable reality. In fact, we've got a guy called Brendan Kavanagh coming on with us a little later, who discovered what it was like, Jill, to have 6 police officers turn up at your house, put handcuffs on you and your wife, take you away while your 3 kids were left home alone because of an exchange of emails you'd had with a vicar. I mean, I'm not kidding you. So we've got that going on over there when it comes to free speech, and people calling for the death of Jews on a stage in Glastonbury, who apparently will get no such visit, I'd imagine, from the old Bill.
What I'm sick of is that I can't have an opinion that's my own. You know, it has to fall in line with what the government tell me I've got to think. And it isn't, you know, there isn't everything in this world that I agree with, things I don't agree with, and I should be allowed to voice my opinion. And the fact that this woman has been put in prison for a couple of years because she voiced an opinion. I mean, she felt afterwards that she'd said the wrong thing. That's fair enough. But these idiots, and still they're showing Glastonbury on the BBC.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, these characters that were saying this apparently would be, you know, I'd imagine they really think this stuff. It's, you know, Lucy Connolly wrote something that was, you know, pretty grim and distasteful, but I don't imagine she really thinks she wants people to set fire to places with anyone in it. It was reactive, it was stupid, we all know that. All of those words have been said. Whereas these guys really believe what they're saying. They think this is okay.
But they said death, you know, kill someone, basically.
Yes.
I mean, it was,
death too. As the lawyer said, Jill, any sentence that starts with death too, then you're on a fairly sticky wicket when it comes to claiming that you don't intend violence.
Well, it will be interesting to see if they do something, as if the police do something to this group, because they should be put in front of a judge like that poor woman was and put in prison for a couple of years.
And judged for it, yeah. Jill, great point. Thank you very much indeed for that. United Talent Agency, UTA, have reportedly severed ties with British punk duo Bob Vylan following that performance at Glastonbury. We'll bring you more on that. Ian is down in London. What have you got for us, Ian? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Is that Macron? Because you fancied Blondie when you were 15. Didn't he fancy his wife when he was about 15? So should you Ian Macron
That's
now?
very true, yeah. Although, to be fair, he married his wife.
I don't think your missus will be very
And I
happy.
don't think... the difference is I don't think Blondie or Debbie Harry had any interest in me, sadly. Yeah? But there you go.
Right. Going back to this whole business with that group, I think what really annoys me since is that two things. One, Glastonbury have not actually been closed because of it. All right, the actual fair is over now. The festival is over, but they should lose the licence, everything. There is no way that they did not know it was going to happen, because it's already... We saw it in the Eurovision Song Contest, what was going to happen with this sort of thing.
Yeah.
They showed there, and they were able to control it. So it shows you that the BBC were out of order, right? And there is no way that they got booked without it. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Anyone with a tiny bit of research would have known. In fact, everyone should have been on high alert, surely, this year to go, hang on a sec, look, if ever there's going to be a year where we're going to get people saying this kind of stuff, it's going to be this one. And it was.
Also, since then, you know, and no disrespect, you know I love your radio station and yourselves and Mike, they should not be replaying what he actually said.
Well, you're absolutely right. There was a journalistic and a very lengthy discussion about exactly that. I mean, do you play it to show the horror of what was played, or by playing it, do you reaffirm the offence?
It more.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is always the danger with any news story, isn't it? That, like Kneecap, nobody had ever heard of Kneecap until everyone started talking about them. Now they're probably selling more than they've ever sold in their life.
And it's like with Mike, and I'm sure with yourself, you remember the bugger from, sorry about my French, from not Southall, the one up where he did the murders,
yes.
Southport, right? That you stopped saying his name.
Indeed.
And everything else. Right, and it should be the same thing there.
I get it. Listen, Ian, I've got to step in for time, no other reason. I absolutely hear what you just said, though, in terms of how much oxygen you give to somebody who's at the coalface of an offensive story. More from you on the way right now on Talk. Let's get the latest news at 2 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Yeah, welcome back to the show. It is a hot summer's day, and that's why it's hot, because it's a summer's day. Keir Starmer and Israel have blasted the BBC over Bob Villan's Glastonbury chants of death to the IDF. Officials have called it hate speech. Police now investigating. Where is the line between what you call free speech and hate speech? Your responses on that. Loads of great calls and comments still coming in. Also, a YouTube pianist with more than 2 million followers, Brendan Kavanagh, and his wife have accused police of traumatising their kids during their arrest for harassment after raising concerns about alleged misconduct by a Catholic minister. Brendan joins us later in the programme. It's an incredible story. You can look up the details online after we've chatted on this, but we'll chat to Brendan. He's with us in the studio in about 25 minutes. And Wimbledon kicks off today. 23 British players in the singles. That's the highest number of Brits, by the way, since 1984. Players and fans are facing scorching heat with temperatures of 30 degrees being recorded nearby. That's the hottest start to Wimbledon on record. It's going to be an absolute scorcher. Not if you're on the court, you've learned how to play in those kind of temperatures. If you're sitting there and you're right in the sunny side, you are knackered. You really don't want to see 5 sets of tennis, I promise you. Lines are open on all of this. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Ian, who says Lucy Connolly was commented upon a riot where the killing of immigrants was possible. Bob Villan, idiot though, he is asking for making the chant. He's talking about thousands of miles away, which none of the crowd is going to attack. I think Lucy's case, the judge should have used his discretion in sentencing and suspended her sentence. That would have been perfect, wouldn't it? That would have been perfect, to suspend it. Then the judge could have made the severity case quite clear, but suspending it would have, words on social media and 31 months in prison don't go together very well for free speech advocates. I know it wasn't nice. However, the point, I think, Ian, that had been made by a couple of guests was that this is clear. Look, Hamas are not going to go, well, we weren't going to attack some Israeli soldiers, but then we heard this couple of chances from Ipswich at Glastonbury, and now we've really armed ourselves up and we're going to give it Billy Big Guns. That's not going to happen either. But you're still left with the irredeemable reality that 2 people on a stage got tens of thousands of people chanting death to, in this case, the IDF. And as our Jewish lawyer mentioned a little earlier from Lawyers for Israel, any sentence that starts with death to, it's probably not best chanted en masse at a big public gathering if you want to be taken seriously on anything in the future. Let's get a word on this and the big stories of the day. We've got Alan Tolhurst back with us. Alan, of course, is chief reporter at Politics Home. Alan, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
So there it is. This is Starmer now blasting the BBC, demands for an explanation for broadcasting these appalling death to the IDF moment at Glastonbury and other things there as well. Keir Starmer has criticised the Beeb for airing it, and of course we know that others have stepped in. Israel themselves have attacked as well the pro-Palestinian statements. Let's have a listen to Shadow Home Office Minister Matt Vickers, who was on Talk earlier today. Speaking to Mike, here's what he said.
Every year Glastonbury gets worse and worse, more vile, more disgusting. Every so many months we have this debate about the BBC and what they are and aren't broadcasting, and how it lacks any form of political neutrality or independence. This has turned the dial again. We need to go back again. We need to have a national debate again about the state of the BBC, and we probably need to put it out of its misery.
Oh, very interesting. So you think it's time for the BBC to be unfunded
I think we need to look at it again. I think this has brought things to another new low bar for the BBC. It's absolutely appalling. Somebody needs to be held to account. It's all well and good issuing an apology. There needs to be action. We need to make sure that this cannot carry on. And if it is going to carry on, then they can go and form some lefty channel somewhere and get on with it, not at the cost of the taxpayer.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, Alan, Mike really cuts a wonderful image, doesn't he, in a summer dress. That, of course, was Julia. He was speaking to a little later, which is a bit bizarre because I was sitting in the office out there watching it at the time. Nonetheless, there it is. There's been a lot of criticism on this one, as much for the BBC as the act that said what they said.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's obviously, you know, the Bob Villain guys. They are, you know, self-confessed kind of provocateurs. I think it was clear they were going to use the kind of the pulpit of having the big stage at Glastonbury to say something kind of provocative. And I don't think anyone was surprised. Anyone who went to go and watch them, I don't think would have been surprised in that sense. But clearly for the BBC, it's a bit of an own goal, given that they spent the whole run up to Glastonbury worrying about what kneecap, another kind of controversial.
Yes.
Might say, and then obviously they were kind of taken a bit by surprise, I suppose, by Bob Villain. And it's, you know, the fact is this wasn't, you know, being put out live on the BBC. This was then streamed, and then, you know, they could have prevented it. You know, there are other things that people might have done on stage. They would have prevented that from going out at all. The fact they allowed this to go out, put a warning, and then decided later on to kind of pull it, you know, it's a real kind of failure, given how, you know, hyper aware they would have been about any of this kind of stuff, given what was going on with kneecap. So yeah, it's a real own goal, regardless whether you think it was the right thing to do. They clearly should have been, you know, avail to this, because then you're going to have people like Matt Vickers and others circling around saying that, you know, this is another reason why the BBC should be, you know, looked at again. I don't quite understand his argument there, but clearly people who are criticising the BBC are going to use this as another example of why they think the BBC should be changed.
But of course, there would have been people at the BBC dying on the spot as these words were read out, thinking, "Oh, for goodness' sake, what have we done?" But it wasn't cut, and the BBC did have notice, Alan, didn't they? That, you know, we knew about kneecap, but even if you did a bit of cursory research into this Bob Villain outfit, you might have got an idea of where they could go. And even if it wasn't them, you know, there is you know, it's an arty festival. If people are going to make those kind of statements, that's absolutely where they're going to do it. They've done it on previous years, so they had notice, and they had noticed that this year could be more troubling, perhaps, than ever. So the BBC can't walk away from this going, it's just free speech. And I think
I think it's right. They've kind of apologised.
I think we've slightly lost Alan's line there. Do you know, this must be something to do with the sizzling temperatures that are out there today. It's clearly mucking around with the gubbins, which is where we send that apocryphal man with a bag of spanners up a pylon to fix it. He's tweaked the Wi-Fi. He was literally on Alan's roof within seconds, and it's now apparently working like a dream. Alan, you're back with us.
Good. I'm glad it was. Well, my chickens are roaming around. I wonder if maybe they'd bitten in through one of the cables. Maybe that was perhaps some of the problem.
They probably heard the word BBC mentioned and started, you know, clucking off, as it were, to coin a phrase.
Indeed. Yeah, you're right. No, because I think, you know, because obviously of the stuff around Kneecap, I think because Kneecap, there was talk of censoring their performance, I think clearly anyone else who wanted to make a statement was obviously going to take this opportunity to do so. Yeah, so they should have been kind of hyper aware and hyper vigilant. And I think there needed to be a better process in place. And obviously they know that, as I say, people are going to be circling around to kind of criticise them for this. And they've really given themselves an opportunity for those critics to have a go at them. And I think obviously politics is going to be dragged into this and stuff as well. And I think it's going to be a real kind of, you know, I think probably a watershed moment for how these protests, you know, on stage are dealt with, because obviously they can't find themselves in the same situation again. There are going to be other festivals that are going to be broadcasting. Same thing's going to be happening again if those similar sorts of acts are booked for them.
Yeah, 100%. Let's move to this story. Keir Starmer has had the worst start of any new Prime Minister, according to new polling. This, of course, goes from bad to worse for Keir Starmer. He sort of cut off a bit of a rebellion last week. There's still about 50 MPs, though. They're going to give him some right stick tomorrow by the looks of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one person celebrating will probably be Liz Truss, I would imagine, for this. That she's no longer the worst performing start to being a prime minister. But yeah, you're right. Obviously, I think, you know, coming up to that 1 year anniversary, I think, you know, the government have a lot of people say that they failed to kind of tell a story, that they've been able to sort of let people know what it is they're trying to do and take the public kind of with them. The public voted for change, voted to get rid of the Conservatives, but there wasn't really necessarily a kind of a thought through kind of summation of what they were voting for, and the government have failed to kind of provide that in that year since, and that's obviously why things obviously have happened, and those ratings are plummeting. You're now seeing kind of this big rebellion. They've sort of semi-quelled it, sort of half a U-turn, but they could still have a huge number of MPs voting against it, perhaps not enough to bring the bill down, but a huge number of MPs, and then the government has to choose whether either they withdraw the whip from dozens of their own MPs, or they have kind of very humiliating situation where loads of their MPs are going through the lobby against them. So yeah, not a kind of very happy anniversary in number 10.
Yeah, indeed. And of course these things can almost start a bit of a domino effect, can't they, with a Prime Minister? I mean, you could argue he's sort of halfway through that domino effect, as some people see it, but something like this, I mean, they might, are they going to withdraw the whip from 50 MPs if they vote against this tomorrow?
I think that's unlikely. That never seems to go well, and it's his. But it's what happens to the Prime Minister's authority, because once it starts getting chipped away, once he no longer becomes the person who delivered this monumental majority in people's eyes, the sort of person who's perhaps the person blocking them from being able to use that majority and from potentially winning again in the future, then it's very hard for him to kind of maintain that authority. But at the same time, they've backed themselves into a corner where when you start to U-turn, when you start to kind of show that you're willing to back down in the face of threats from your own MPs, and it's very hard to get that authority back again. So they find themselves in a really tricky situation. This kind of big threat, if you vote against it, you're essentially allowing reform to win the next election. It doesn't seem to be necessarily holding water with a lot of those MPs who are willing to rebel. So where the government kind of sorts this out, it remains to be seen.
Indeed. Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, is on a sex drive, it seems. Let me explain. She wants more young people to have kids. She's emphasised that tackling Britain's plummeting birth rate, now 1.44 children per woman, is the lowest in decades. And it's one of those stats that doesn't sound on the face of it. Sounds more like a kind of funny bit of anecdote in the pub, but actually has very serious economic implications going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. An aging population is really difficult economically, essentially, and in real kind of trouble if you have this aging population. We already have far fewer working age people as opposed to people who are of retirement age. Due to obviously all the people who are not in work, and part of that obviously is due to people are not able to. The problem is that there's the lack of kind of money for things like housing. People don't feel they're in the position to be able to have a child. Obviously, the issues with childcare and how expensive that is. So clearly, it's not just a kind of a nativist policy, or which obviously sometimes people are wary of saying people should have more children, that it's sort of seen as a bit kind of nativist. But this is purely an economic thing. That obviously, if you do have a lot more children, then we are able to kind of build up that working age population versus those kind of retirements. But obviously, it's going to take a long time for that to take place, and there's a lot of stuff needs to happen in order for that to work. So I think they're going to have to put in a lot of money towards things like childcare to make people think that they are willing or able to.
Because at the moment, as you rightly said, it's a very expensive affair starting a family, and one that many can do without at the moment. Alan, thank you as ever. Alan Tolhurst is chief reporter over there at Politics. So more comment coming in from you on the weekend at Glastonbury. John in Fife says, because of past instances of people being sacked because of what they've posted online about COVID, should the crowd who chanted hate speech be identified and the same fate behold them? Well, you do kind of wonder when you think, well, hang on a second, there's a lot of stuff far more inane and innocuous even than this, where people have lost a job or been ostracised, if nothing else. Elaine's in Derbyshire. Elaine, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hello, Ian.
Hello.
You were saying, I can't believe this has happened. Well, I was watching a Northern Irish comedian online about 3 days ago, and they were laughing, I won't name his name, laughing and joking about how some of the artists had actually written to Glastonbury saying that they were really concerned because they don't want to be dragged into politics. And then every time, they go somewhere, they keep getting asked about Kneecap and Palestine, and they're not interested.
Yeah.
And they said it with them badly. And then Glastonbury promptly leaked the letter. And then the fallout from that was some of the bands started getting death threats and cancelled. And then Glastonbury wrote a letter saying, if you don't like our politics, then go elsewhere. Now, for me, Glastonbury is... I don't really watch it, but it seems to me it's a political event, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So then the BBC need to dispatch political journalists and not musical ones. So as soon as these people come off stage, what did you mean, Laura Kunzberg or whatever? What did you mean about death to the West or whatever? And that's how we need to do it. Or it needs to come off the BBC and go onto ITV or Netflix that's not publicly funded. The idea that this wasn't going to be known is a joke. And the other thing I would say is that all these people crying now about free speech, all that's being applied is the laws that they cried for Nigel Farage, for Lucy Connolly, for all the people who said that they don't want mass immigration, for the people who said, for the feminists that said trans women aren't women. They're only getting what they cried for. So this is the thing. If they do not agree with this and think free speech absolutist, then they need to you need to ask them every time someone comes on, so do you agree with us now that Lucy Connolly should be free?
Yeah, well, it's forced...
Get their jobs back.
100%. It's forced people into those now kind of like difficult dilemmas because they're defending this outfit. But, you know, what is it just stuff we agree with that we defend? I mean, there is perhaps a little bit of that in all of us, but brilliant point made. Elaine, thank you very much indeed. Elaine in Derbyshire, more calls for you in a few moments. We'll talk to Helen Joyce as well, regularly helps us out with gender-based matters. Absolutely incredible voice on this area, and there are some stories that really need highlighting because they're of huge concern. Find out what they are next on Talk.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, and as some of you will have heard, this Friday does mark 1 year since Labour's landslide election victory, and to commemorate the occasion, we've put together a special 1 hour programme looking back at Starmer's first 12 months. Myself and Mike, Julia, Peter Cargwell, Alex Phillips, Kevin, of course, appear on 1 year of chaos, which airs Friday, the 4th of July at 9 p.m. right here on Talk, and you'll be able to listen and watch it again as well on YouTube afterwards. Let's move to this story. I mean, just extraordinary. Campaigners warning that digital IDs could let predators pose as women to target children. Sex Matters have highlighted 45 cases, while the government insists safeguards will protect users. The Children's Commissioner has pledged to review the concerns. Let's speak now to Helen Joyce. Helen is, of course, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, also the author of Trans, Gender Identity and the New Battle for Women's Rights, and regularly helps us out on these kind of stories. Afternoon to you, Helen. I mean, amazing work that you guys have done on this. Just put a bit more meat on the bones of what has happened here and what's the problem. Thank you.
Sure. So this is the data bill, which has been passed. It's going to become law. And what it does is it digitises all the government sources of data about us, like DVLA, passports, NHS data. And those things are going to form the backbone of a new system whereby you'll be able to use apps to prove things about yourself. For example, if you're buying alcohol, to prove that you're old enough. If you're renting somewhere, to prove that you've got the right to rent. If you're working, that you're entitled to work, that sort of thing. So broadly speaking, a good idea, and no sharing of data without your permission. So privacy protecting. The trouble is that all these sources have been allowed to become corrupted on the subject of sex. You can change the sex that's recorded on your passport, your driving licence, your NHS records, just by writing a letter, basically. And the government knows this because we've made sure they know it, but they're still saying that there isn't a problem with information coming through this information gateway that it's called. And you can see how this works if you want. You can download the Post Office Easy ID app, which is already a proof of concept. I've done this. I can show people me, use my thumbprint to show that it's me, and it says that I'm female. I am actually female, of course, but that's information that came from my passport and driving licence, and any man who wants to change their passport or driving licence to say female can do that now. So what we're saying is this is going to become a way with government backing to prove, inverted commas, that you are female, even when you're not. Yeah. Now, you could use your passport to do that now, but they'd be able to see your face and your name and your nationality on it. This is going to be a freestanding way, just on its own, to prove nothing about you except one thing, that you're female. And we think that'll make the crimes of catfishing much easier online. That's when you set up a fake identity to lure people, sometimes into sexual crimes, sometimes into blackmail. It's done to children. Children have been suicidal because of being, encouraged to do things they shouldn't by men who have presented themselves as women. And now they're going to be able to say, blue tick, government says I am a woman.
And this is extraordinary because, of course, it sort of flies against the conclusion of the Supreme Court, where you might have thought that this, call it a loophole, call it whatever, but you might have thought this would be addressed. And, the digital world is not an insignificant little side dish of life these days. It's the future of identity, of who we are, etc. So the idea, and you're absolutely right, your passport, you can call yourself a woman and get an F rather than an M on your driving licence or passport, but this would circumnavigate all of that, which seems utterly bizarre.
I think the thing is, it's been happening for decades. It's been possible to change on these paper documents your sex for a long time, bureaucratically. And not many people have done that, but more and more have. And they're not even keeping track of it. We don't know how many people have done this. We reckon there's probably about 100,000 people who have changed their sex on at least one government form of ID. But that's just an informed guess. Nobody is keeping track of it. And those people could even change their sex on one piece of document and then not on another. Get two apps, be man one day and woman another day, go out in boy or girl mode, depending on what they want. And the government just isn't facing up to the fact that this problem happened before it came into power, but now it's landed on them to fix it.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, just to compound what appears to be the ignoring of the Supreme Court, we now have this story today that Ofcom have said that broadcasters must air views that trans women are women. So, I mean, this is a bit of a leaked letter situation as we understand it, but I can almost hear them over there in the boardroom going, well, no, we mustn't say that. No, you literally can say that because the Supreme Court has ruled on it, but there still seems to be resistance.
Absolutely, and there was no resistance the other way around. I mean, if they were just saying, look, it's not up to us to tell you what to say. If you want to say trans women are women, fill your boots. And if you want to tell the truth and say that trans women are men, we're not going to stop you. Yeah. But they don't seem to be saying that. They seem to be saying that you have to air the idea that they might be women. But that's not true. They just aren't. You can say it if you want, but it's not true. Yes. And they should be on the side of the truth.
Well, indeed, I mean, it's quite easy to work out, isn't it? It just seems to me that they were uncomfortable with the High Court, the Supreme Court decision. So in order to offset that and so they don't get too many complaints, they're now saying that if you're having an interview with somebody who calls themselves a trans woman, you must sort of at some point acknowledge that at least they think they're a woman, and therefore we can all go home and go to sleep at night knowing we've ticked every box. That's what appears to be going on here, rather than actually
I think it's
stating
about
the
pronouns.
truth.
It's literally about pronouns. They're saying that you can't call a man who says he's a woman he. I just have.
Yes.
And nobody's head exploded, so it's obviously possible. But that's basically what they're saying, that you've got to say she, and that's the unbiased thing to do, whereas that's actually the biased thing to do, because it's not true.
Because it's not true. As simple as that. And just in terms of the story we began with there, on this grim roller coaster that keeps on going, it seems, Helen, what are the government listening to your voice on this? Because, I mean, what you're exposing here and highlighting is more than just a technicality. This has potentially incredibly serious implications.
Well, I was pleased to see that the Prime Minister has just said that he expects everybody to implement the Supreme Court ruling. Now, it's 2.5 months since that ruling, and among the people who aren't implementing it are government departments.
Yeah.
They're saying that they're waiting for further guidance on what to do about their workplace toilets. But, I mean, the law is the law. What the Supreme Court said is the law, and what it said was, if you're running a single-sex space, that means sex, not gender identity, not paperwork. We already know that. So, OK, are they going to listen to the Prime Minister? They didn't listen to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Well, we'll watch this space. I know we're going to talk again, I'm sure, on this, Helen. Thank you for your time as ever. Helen Joyce, Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, with us on that. It just seems to go from bad to worse, this, doesn't it? It's really easy to kind of work out. It's not about offending anyone. And I think most broadcasters have already acknowledged that they've no desire to... they're perfectly fine of introducing someone as a they're not going to say, here's a trans woman, by the way, it's really a geezer. No one is going to say that. But what you don't need to be is compelled, if you're having this kind of debate, to at least at some point somehow recognise that some people do think trans women are women. Have you got to say that? Has that got to be in the... Am I going to be talking about one of these cases where someone in my ear, a producer, says, oh, don't forget to mention the bit that trans women are women, according to some? I mean, there's not meant to be a caveat to it. Crazy times, kids. Norman's in Dartford. Back to that issue of free speech. It all feeds into this. Isn't it funny? There is an underpinning correlation between so many stories these days. Norman, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Well, I'm more talking about the Gaza business and the BBC.
Yeah, the BBC. Bob Villan.
I don't think it was a mistake. I think it was deliberate.
By the BBC?
Yes. They knew what was coming. No one's going to tell me, oh, there wasn't people there who could pull the button or do it. That's absolute nonsense. They now have gone to... If they've gone to their heads, they think they're bigger, more arrogant than ever, and they can do and say exactly what they like and get away with it.
Do you think they would have specifically known about the chant, the death to the IDF? Do you think they might have known?
Well, anything could have happened. You know it's going to happen. Something's going to go on when you... That band has been known to the BBC for 10 years.
Yeah.
That bloke.
The band?
Last night.
The band have been known to the BBC for 10 years?
Yes.
Have they?
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody knew who they were.
Well, this bloke was known to the BBC all that time ago.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I wonder if, I'm not here to defend them, obviously, but I wonder in what context he was known.
Look, you don't work in that sort of business, this entertainment business, and not know what's going on. If you do, you shouldn't be in it.
Well, you would, at the very least, you would have known that somebody is going to say something that could probably go, above the line of free speech into some kind of hate speech. You'd have to be stupid to not know that. I wouldn't be staggered because it's the BBC, but the idea that there wasn't a meeting of minds that said, look, it's a live feed and we've got a real issue here, potentially, so anything that crosses that line, we understand free speech, even if we don't like it, but anything that crosses that line, we pull the plug. They must have... Wouldn't you expect, Norman, that a meeting like that would have taken place?
Well, of course it would have done. I take that as read. It's incredible what people think, oh, they could have done this. They had no intention of doing it.
Yeah.
No intention whatsoever of doing it.
But that suggests that every person involved in the production, and there's probably hundreds, would all been of the same thinking.
No, but there's only a certain number of people.
Well, there would have been a producer that could have said, cut this now. That's a fact.
Well, yeah.
There would have been a producer that could have said, right, we've just... The moment the guy got the first line out of death to the eye, bang, that could have gone.
Of course it could. But
and then the BBC could have said, look, as soon as we heard it, we got rid of it.
That's it, but it wouldn't have been okay then.
Yeah.
Of course they didn't do it. And I've said it's deliberate. I can't see any other reason for it.
Well, it's so illogical that it draws you to exactly that position, Norman. I get it. Thank you, as ever, Norman in Dartford. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to a man called Brendan Kavanagh in just a moment. He's a very prolific YouTuber for a couple of reasons. One, he was doing piano stuff. That doesn't underplay it. He's got about 2.5 million subscribers, but he's also very big on free speech, but found himself on the wrong end of the law. In fact, he found himself, as did his wife, in a pair of handcuffs not that long ago. So what was his crime? What did he do wrong? And how did he end up in the chiller for 24 hours? Details coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, 25 to 3. Let's look at this story. I'm going to call our next guest to start with a YouTube pianist. There's much more to him than that. Not that that's not significant enough. YouTube pianist Brendan Kavanagh and his wife were arrested after they raised concerns about a priest allegedly defrocked for child abuse. Police seized £12,000 in electronics, leaving their 3 children terrified. After 2 months, the case was dropped with no crime found to have been committed. Brendan criticised police for acting on complete lies, sparking debate over policing priorities. We're joined in the studio by the man himself, Brendan Kavanagh. Brendan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Ian.
Let's just clear up this thing firstly. So, YouTube pianist, I mean, you're because you've got 2.5 million subscribers to your channel, which is massive. I mean, by anybody's, that is massive. Initially, that was really all about your piano work, right?
Yeah, I mean, I started off posting online lessons. I mean, I'm trained as a secondary school teacher, so that's my official job, you know. But when the YouTube started taking off, I decided to ditch teaching and become a full-time YouTuber because the money was so much better.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and less hassle as well.
And less hassle, less Ofsted.
Yeah, less of all of that. But of course, you know, more recently you've used it more, you know, also for free speech.
Yeah,
videos
I mean,
as well.
what I do, Ian, is when something happens to me, I actually film film it, because a lot of people say a lot of things seem to be happening to you, Brendan. It's only because I actually document it. Like if I'm in the station and the police come up to me, I tend to film it and put it online, and so it's become almost like a vlog of my daily life and what happens to me. And obviously what happened to me a couple of days, a couple of months ago was quite extreme.
Yeah. Well, here's how it happened for me. So I'm sitting at home. You'll know this because you've got kids. And I'd cooked the kids some food and couldn't be bothered to cook for myself. So I just ended up eating what they'd left.
Right.
And I was sitting there on the kitchen top and eating pasta and some other bits and pieces. And I was looking at your video, but I didn't have any sound up at the time. I was just looking at the video and I just thought, hang on, what's this?
He's a drug mastermind.
Who is this man? Like, he seems to be on some sort of farm, and a load of police cars have shown up.
Yeah.
The police car, and I'm looking and going, hang on, no, whoa, he's in handcuffs now. He's in handcuffs. I thought, I've got to watch this back, and I watched it back, and I turned up the commentary where you're explaining what it is from your own CCTV, wasn't it, where you live?
Yeah.
So tell us what had happened then on this. I don't know whether to start with the day of the arrest or whether.
Well, the day of the arrest was April Fool's Day.
So you're thinking,
well, I thought it was my mate Terry, who's another YouTuber, who said he was going to get me back with a prank, and I thought Terry's gone through a lot of trouble.
Terry from the Rose and Crown, he's always putting
Terry
one,
Miles, my mate Terry Miles, he was going to get me back, and I thought Terry's put a lot of money into this prank, you know.
He's done well. They've all got the right uniforms, even the cars.
I thought Terry's really pulled out. Well, I honestly thought it was my mate Terry Miles. Check out his YouTube channel, by the way. Yeah. But when they started marching towards me, Frog March style, like the Death March, I thought, oh my goodness, what is going on? And then they slapped my wife in handcuffs, and I thought, what is going on?
Did they do that instantly, the handcuffs?
They grabbed my phone, put me in handcuffs, and then they put Lorraine in handcuffs, and then my jaw just dropped. My wife, and then the children. We didn't know where the children were.
You can get nicked for shoplifting and not have handcuffs put on. I mean, what were they expecting?
I mean, Lorraine, my wife, did manage to get the handcuffs off after about 20 minutes, so you don't actually see her in handcuffs. But
she's kind of off camera.
But you know, they said that she was capable of violence, that she was going to do violence to herself or to others. So I don't know where they got that from.
But why did they stick you in handcuffs initially before going? Oh, the reason we're here.
Well, he said to me, the officer said he didn't know what my reaction would be.
Well, there's plenty of people that get it. In fact, police forces around the world look at British police and go, isn't it interesting how often they don't put people in handcuffs? You know, even for sometimes serious offences.
But I mean, they were very gung ho, and I think when they have a sort of white, inoffensive middle-class couple, they really think they're in a cop movie. The adrenaline was pumping. They really got into it, and I think they thought they were in a cop movie.
Did you have any clue as to why they were there when they first
Well,
showed
they
up?
told me. They said it's because of harassment. You've got a harassment complaint by Father, let's call him Father Fake, the defrocked priest, who made a harassment complaint. And as a result of basically his victim testimony, because there was very little evidence apart from my emails, my non-violent emails, that's all they had. As a result of his theatrical performance in the police station, they arrested me because of how he felt. That's what they told me.
But even, I mean, there's so many questions around this, even allowing for the fact. If I turned up at a cop shop tomorrow and said, I think I've been harassed by somebody, I would never imagine that the police would go, OK, no problem, we'll send 6 police officers round to their house. I mean, you wouldn't, bearing in mind, it's hard to get a cop round if you've had your car nicked.
OK, it's a really good question. I think the point is they went in, the 2 of them went in, the bishop and this priest, who were both complicit with each other, and they went in full clerical garb to the Metropolitan Police. Walking in with and they put on a show, right? So I think the police were very, very impressed with the clerical garb. I mean, these people are not even part of the mainstream church, right? They're part of a sect. But they were obviously very, very impressed with, I'm bishop this and I'm that, and they were clearly very impressed with the demeanour of the priest and the bishop. And I think that's what swung it.
That swung it. So you'd had an email exchange with one of these people?
With both of them.
With both of them. And had that gone on for some time?
No, it was only about 3 or 4 emails. I mean, this wasn't like thousands of emails. This was very short, over a period of about a month. I was saying, why is this priest still in service? Get him out, you know?
Yeah, because there'd been an allegation of abuse.
There had, and like the thing which tipped it over the edge, and in one of my emails, and I think this is what sent them over the edge, is I threatened to go to the media because the priest was still in active service, and I had given the official documentation of his laicization. Nothing was being done. He was going around to families with children, offering to say private masses. And I said to his bishop, if you don't take him out of public ministry, I'm going to go to the media. And that's when all hell broke loose. That's when they went to the police and thought they'd shut me up with a harassment suit.
But you might have thought the police at that point would have gone, hang on a second, so this fella Brendan is threatening to go to the media, that would suggest there might be more to this story. You might think that a diligent cop would first think that.
Well,
why would they go to the
in
media?
modern policing,
must have a story.
Right, in modern policing, there is a complete lack of common sense. Common sense is good. There is no good judgment anymore. Somebody can come in, give a theatrical performance, say my feelings are hurt, and the police will investigate. So the police can actually be used as a vexatious tool to silence people, because if you come in, it's very much on your emotions and your feelings and your impact statement, and you can talk a load of BS, but if you can give a convincing performance, the police will come out and investigate, and they love doing it, and they seized all our equipment. My solicitor said they love seizing equipment because they want to get you for looking at dodgy stuff on the internet, right? So they went through all my hard drives, they found nothing, but they seized all our stuff, and that's really what they wanted.
I mean, that to me was the other bit as well. Again, there's loads of crimes you could commit and no one would nick all your kit. I mean, but with this, because it was to do with communication, everything electronic, every computer, I'm sure the odd switch got put in the bag as well. You know, everything was in there. Your phones, all taken away from you. And when I saw the imagery, and for those who are watching visually, you can see it on screen now. There's 3 police vehicles there. You've got 3 kids as well.
Yeah.
So they're at home with you. No one else is there looking after them at this stage. So what happened there? I know your eldest daughter first came out.
Yeah, well, first of all, we didn't know it because we've got a 5-acre farm. We've got some goats and some animals, and the children are off for doing this and doing that. And we don't know where they are. I mean, it's a safe environment for them. And so when the police arrested, we didn't know where the children were. And one of them, Zoe, was hiding in her room. She didn't know what was going on. Our little boy, Zach, was just wandering around aimlessly, and Gemma, who's the eldest, I shouted at her, and she eventually came to talk to me. But
to see her dad in handcuffs.
To see her dad, and the police lady put her hand up and said, "Stop talking to your child."
Is that allowed at that point?
And she said, "You're distressing them." She said, "You're distressing your child by calling them. Just get in the back of the van and shut up."
So you end up, after all of it, how long did that whole scene...
The police were at our house for about 3 hours. They went, after this, they went into our house, searched it from top to bottom. There was so much equipment, they took it all out. And then we had to get a neighbour to come from 17 miles away to look after the children. They were there for 3 hours.
I mean, just the mere idea that you'd had an email communication with somebody who had said they didn't like it very much.
Yes.
And that provoked... Was it 6 officers altogether?
It was 6 officers. I mean, basically, lies were told. The fake priest was saying that I was calling on my followers to beat him up, that I called him a PDF file online, and that I had given out his address, and that I was getting my 2.5 million followers to go around and beat him up on the street. Now, this could have been verified by a check.
Yeah.
Because it was completely fake, but they didn't. They didn't even check that claim. Okay?
You think the man of the cloth might have been a bit hesitant before saying something that could be easily checked as well?
Well, our barrister is all over this because he said the evidence was just basically non-existent.
Yes.
So we're going to be suing them for basically kidnapping and false imprisonment.
Yeah.
And we're going to take them criminally. We're going to sue them criminally. And he said there was absolutely no basis for the arrest. And my emails, people are saying, "Oh, you sent violent emails threatening." My emails were not violent. The most I said was to the bishop he was a disgrace for not taking this priest out of service.
Well, that sounds perfectly reasonable, put like that, doesn't it?
But basically, I think the problem is that the police are run now by emotions, by your feelings. They really are the hurty feelings police, because if you can go in and say that your feelings are hurt and you feel subjectively alarm and distress, that's all they want, because they use it as an excuse to seize your electronics, because they want to get you on something that you're looking at your computer, because that's really what they want. Okay, so all our stuff was sent to Luton, it was sent to the lab. Everything was down.
God.
Yeah,
it was what did they think you were running? Some kind of soprano racket?
My little boy Zachy had a tag on the computer. It says, "Oh, they've been taken to Luton," which apparently is the big centre for downloading all your stuff. So we had about several computers, all the hard drives, all our phones. Every single thing was downloaded over a period of about 3 days. All our family, everything. They didn't find anything. So yes, I have had my hard drives checked. There was nothing on it, and I think they were really, really disappointed.
I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? You'd think if you were telling somebody that story, then the crime, in inverted commas, that you would have had to have committed would be some sort of international drug lord.
I know.
You know, somebody who was...
We're running a terror cell.
You're running a terror cell, something like that. The idea that a lone complaint at a police station would even result in that. And the bit that really don't get, Brendan, if somebody had turned up at the police station and they said, look, OK, we'll send an officer round at some point, and, I don't know, a couple of days later, you had a knock on the door from PC Smithers and said, very sorry to disturb you, Mr Kavanagh. I've had this fella come in, he said this, can we just hear your side? That would have been OK.
Well, Ian, you've obviously got the voice of common sense, right? But apparently,
we are the station of common sense.
But apparently under Blair, this changed. Blair brought in these laws where the police could come in gung-ho like this. They didn't used to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And the overkill is just unbelievable.
It's that, isn't it?
And like also, you know, a couple of million people have seen this arrest, and the police's reputation is going lower and lower and lower with the public. They're shoplifting all over the place, knife crime, snatch crime. The police haven't got resources, but you send an angry email or you put a tweet on and they come down on you and take you in. I mean, how much did this arrest cost?
Well, yeah, and all the forensic people that had to look through your hard drive.
This cost thousands.
When you had the interview, did you know, was there a point when the officers, you could tell the officers interviewing you were thinking, this is a bit bonkers?
No, because obviously they were going, I mean, really the whole crux of this was the fake priest victim statement. I mean, that's really what swung this whole thing into motion. And we were stuck in the cells. My wife was in the cells. After about 5 hours, we were put in different cells. The inspector, Inspector Lindsay, a female inspector from Kempston Police Station, she came down, she looked in the cell and she said, oh, we're figuring out whether we should let you go or not, but because the charge is so serious, we're keeping you and your wife in longer.
So serious?
Yeah.
Right.
And
that
so
you sent four emails to her.
Yeah, so we didn't get home until midnight, myself and my wife. Now, we want to know, what evidence were they running off? Right, this really needs to be taken to court, because it beggars belief that the standard of evidence was so low to even allow this, right?
The other thing I don't get, just a final point, Brendan, is that it's not as if the police haven't seen these other cases where this has happened and what the fallout has been.
Right.
The couple that got onto a WhatsApp discussion about their kids' school and the governors. You're familiar with the story, I'm sure.
I am. I mean,
I know,
Maxie Allen and Rachel Levine,
indeed,
we've been in touch with them.
Yeah, Maxie used to be my producer a few years ago. So
I know.
They end up with not a dissimilar thing. Load of police turn up. Absolutely incredible. So when it happens, you might think that the police go, no, we're not going to go down one of those rabbit holes, because otherwise we're going to end up looking really silly out of this. And of course what happens is that they do, and they still pursue it, despite knowing that this... I mean, those officers, when they were interviewing, must have said to each other, this is bloody nonsense.
Well, when we went into the police station, the arresting officer said, oh, you know, the guy behind the counter said, what was it, a tweet? Sort of So they were kind of rolling their eyes a bit. But to be honest, the police now is so compartmentalised. Every section does its job, and there's no kind of common sense chain of command anymore. Everyone just does their little job, and nobody knows what's going on. The police who arrested us didn't really know what was going on, because they were told by the Metropolitan Police to come and arrest us. So they just did their job. So everyone's in a little bubble. Nobody really knows the whole picture. I think the person who needs to be investigated is the inspector who authorised this arrest. Who was it?
We want
to know.
We will watch with interest. Listen, Brendan, thank you for coming in. Let's keep in touch, though, on this.
Thanks, Ian.
It'd be nice to see how this one progresses.
Well, if we take it to court, it will be a very public event, and I will make this public, because I think people have had enough of people being arrested for tweets, for non-threatening emails, and for absolute nonsense, while our streets are absolutely crime-ridden. It's an absolute joke.
Yeah. Brendan, thank you.
Thanks,
Good to see you. Brendan Kavanagh with us here on the programme. You can check him out on YouTube, and, of course, to see for yourself what happened on that grim day over at Brendan's place, as it was. A whole Netflix show in this, I'm sure there is. We'll talk more to you in just a couple of moments right here on Talk.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. And Brendan's story, as you just heard there, just sits within a long line of very similar stories that we've talked about so often and unfortunately probably will in the future. And the bit that I genuinely can't get my head around, as I just said to Brendan, isn't there a point when the individual officers go, no, we're not falling for that one again. We're not going out, 6 of us, to raid a house to take away hard drives because somebody had the audacity to have maybe a robust conversation on WhatsApp or an email exchange with a vicar. Come on, no. We'll just end up looking really silly, and the police will have to issue a statement saying, although we pursued it with good intent, we just, it seems there was no evidence, and on this occasion we might have overreacted, and we've sent a bunch of flowers to the wife and a Haynes manual to the man. Whatever it is they do. You might have thought that somebody had learnt by now, but apparently not. We're going to follow that story up as well as to where it goes next. We've got Nick coming on in just a second on Bob Villan and Glasto and all that went on there over the weekend. Before we do, it's the Voice of Doom, and we're on day 12. Day 12? Nobody has got this so far. Very simple. It's a mystery voice with a political angle. You're looking for a Member of Parliament, but it could be a past Member of Parliament. OK, it is a past Member of Parliament. Won't tell you yet which party. Past Member of Parliament. Who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
Let's hear it again.
I can't guarantee that.
We're looking for a right answer. Don't phone. You can message. You can WhatsApp or message in whatever capacity. If you want to have a crack at this, 87222 is how you get in touch with us. 87222. If you can identify this voice.
I can't guarantee that.
If we get a right answer, we'll reveal all on the other side of the news at 3. Let's talk to Nick down in London. Nick, what have you got for us this afternoon?
Hello, Ian.
Hi.
I hope you're well. Good. I found it a bit strange talking. You were talking to lawyers earlier because their view of what is incitement to violence and what's not. It seems to me the law's a very grey area here, a very grey area indeed. As an ordinary vote, it just seems fairly similar what Bob Villan said or sang and what Lucy Connolly tweeted. It seems all to me, and what I don't get that for is why the legal system can't see that, why it goes into these grey areas. To me, if one goes free and one stays in jail, it's a perfect example of a two-tier legal system.
Particularly when, there is, there's some, and I've often tried to sort of throw the nuance in. There is sometimes, because there's never been a time when we haven't wondered why a bloke in Plymouth got a longer sentence than a bloke in Newcastle for the same event. That's always gone on. But what we've got here are very, very similar situations, right? Almost identical in terms of the upshot, that are potentially, we're yet to see what happens to this Bob Vinyl outfit, but it's so similar that you would think that would have to be taken into account when judges look at precedents and what else is around in this kind of sphere. It would have to surely be a consideration.
You think so? Any common sense. As I say, no justice system which applies different rules to different people can by itself be a justice system. There's something unjust about that, and just the legal system overthinking things. Go back to first ideas here, first principles.
Well, we have indeed, and what we want is some sort of consistency. And if people are advocating that these guys should not go to jail, for example, then you'd have to be consistent and say, well, therefore you must support Lucy Connolly not being in jail. And similarly, if they are saying they should go to jail, then you'd have to support the Lucy Connolly stays in jail. You know, you've got to have consistency, whatever way it works. I mean, frankly, sending people to jail for words is something, you know, even being a half-wit is not a criminal offence, and I don't think we acknowledge that often enough. Listen, I'm going to move Nick for no other reason to get more comment on before the news. Thank you for that. Cam is in Leicestershire. What have you got for us on this, Cam? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Fire away.
Want some common sense. You know, Lucy Connolly goes to jail for, I think it was a tweet or something that she did for 3.5 hours.
Yep.
3 years, so literally an hour for every, a year for every hour that she stayed on. These people made a public statement on, I don't know what the audience was on the BBC.
Yeah. Kill thousands of Jews and everybody should join in with it.
And 250,000 people are listening to that live.
Yeah.
And then the focus has been on what should the BBC have done. But you know what? What should the organisers have done? They already knew the views of these people.
Yeah. Well, they do come from... I mean, this was the place where they chanted, "Woe, Jeremy Corbyn," a couple of years ago, which gives you a sort of a taster of where they are on the political spectrum.
Yeah, but what I wanted to move on to was, we always talk about the government, the BBC, Glastonbury, but there are people that make the decisions to let this run or not run.
Yes.
And we never hold them accountable. The BBC itself is an organisation. It in itself cannot do anything. The Director General cannot be held accountable for everything.
Yeah.
So I think there are a lot of people in the BBC that have a political leaning to one side, and they're obviously employing people that do the same thing, that carry on pushing this and let it through.
Who do you think they are? I mean, I don't mean specifically. That would be amazing if you did know.
I didn't have an agenda. I think they have an agenda.
Well, you do wonder.
Yes, they want to push the country to one side, and they let it through. The problem that we have in our country is we spend millions and millions of pounds on public inquiries blaming an organisation.
Yeah.
Well, individuals make decisions for an organisation, and they should not be allowed to hide behind the organisation.
But here's the thing. I don't think it's necessarily specifically the words. I don't think they would have thought that what went out was particularly controversial or offensive. They would have just... There would have been producers there who didn't even register the levels of horror and offence that had just unfolded in front of them. I don't think some of them would have even clocked it, to be honest, Cam. Listen, I have to move for no other reason, as I always seem to say, than time. Great call again from Cam. There would have been that group that would have gone, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Because, you know, the left always think they're punching up. So all the while they've satisfied themselves. That would have been no different in their world to me having a chance about ISIS and asking for the destruction of a terrorist. That's how they would see it. So they wouldn't even... They're not even at first base on registering what literally just happened in front of them in their own headphones, on their own TV monitors. The idea that nobody clocked it and went, oh, God, what the hell has just happened? No. 0344 499 1000. We've got the voice of doom on the other side of the news. Here's the voice.
I can't guarantee that.
Have we got a winner? You're looking for an old MP, no longer an MP. Details coming up on the other side of the news at 3 o'clock, which is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome back. Lots to get through. We are, of course, talking about what happened at Glastonbury. We know Keir Starmer and Israel have blasted the BBC over the Bob Villan chance of death to the IDF. Officials have called it hate speech. The police are investigating. But isn't it a genuinely interesting question, given the kind of stuff we talk about here a lot on the programme, in terms of where is the line between hate speech and what you'd call free speech? Where does that stand? More on that from you in a couple of moments' time. Also this afternoon, Keir Starmer urging MPs to support disability cuts, facing rebellion already from 50 Labour backbenchers who clearly didn't buy into his watered-down compromise. He must choose between removing the whip, surely not, 50 of them, or risking further damage to his authority. He might have to weather the storm. When push comes to shove, how will those 50 vote tomorrow on that bill? And Wimbledon kicks off today with 23 players in the singles. That's the highest since 1984. Players and fans are facing scorching heat. Temperatures due to get to 30 degrees being recorded nearby. The hottest start to Wimbledon on record. We're live down there at SW19 a little later in this hour. Lots to get through right here on Talk, including the voice of doom. Now, the voice of doom, this has gone on for 12 days so far. We still haven't got a winner. It's a political mystery voice thing. And we are looking for, the clue we gave you, we're looking for a former MP of some kind. Won't say which party or how far they rose up the ranks. The question is, who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
Can we hear it again?
I can't guarantee that.
Who is that? It is not Leon Britton. These are some of the guesses. Paul Boateng, no. John Bercow, Ronnie Wood. Jeremy Thorpe, no. Hilary Benn, Peter Mandelson, no. And no. Ed Davey, no. All wrong answers. We still haven't got a correct answer, which means it returns tomorrow for day 13 as we try and unfold the mystery as to who that might be. Now, Keir Starmer is making a last-ditch effort to convince MPs to back his benefits bill in the Commons tomorrow, but faces a standoff with 50 backbenchers still set on rebelling. Labour whips have urged MPs to await the outcome of the Timms review, after which there could be further concessions before voting against the government. What is likely to happen here? Let's speak to Damien Green, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, former de facto Deputy Prime Minister too. Damien, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
It must be moments like this when you think, I'm so glad I'm not there right now. These horrendous cul-de-sac moments in Parliament where, you know, a government has got to work out. They've got a policy, they want to enact it, they want to get it up and running, whatever the rights and wrongs of it might be. But there's a whole bunch of characters on the backbenchers who are having none of it.
Well, I've never known, I mean, I was in Parliament for 27 years. I don't remember a government running into this sort of trouble after less than a year. I mean, yes. Literally not a year yet since they were elected, with a huge majority. And the fact that we're even contemplating the thought of the government losing a vote on second reading on the main vote on a big important bill is completely extraordinary, and it's a lack of control that's unprecedented in my experience. And
curious that, you know, here we have a party, just to sort of compound all of that, that should still be in a bit of a honeymoon, certainly the tail end of a honeymoon period, with a huge majority. And get to compound it even further, those MPs who've been chomping at the bit for 14 years to become the next government, you might have thought things would be tickety-boo over there at Labour HQ for at least the first 2.5 years. But this thing has gone wrong very quickly for them.
Yeah, and it's gone wrong for sort of fairly obvious reasons. They appeared not to have any plan when they came into government, and so they've been being pushed around by events. And you know, they've made they made their first big decision was on the winter fuel allowance, which was foolish and they hadn't promised and everyone felt betrayed by it. And then their second and perhaps long-term fatal decision was to do a U-turn, was to succumb to pressure. And now, therefore, the message has got out there on the Labour backbenches is that if you push Keir Starmer hard enough, he'll give way. And so that's what they're doing. And I mean, there are people who in the Labour Party, on the left of the Labour Party, will always vote against anything. And let's be clear that some form of welfare reform, cutting the welfare bill, is exactly the right thing to try to do. But the interesting thing about this rebellion is that it's attracting normally respectable and sober citizens who don't rebel all the time, but who think that the government hasn't explained its position. I think it's pretty clear they're only doing this because Rachel Reeves couldn't make the numbers add up. They're not doing it out of any sense that the previous Conservative government had, that we needed to reform welfare, we needed to cut welfare bills. We can't have this many working age people not going to work. That's the underlying point that the government is rightly trying to grapple with, but they're just doing it with extraordinary ineptitude.
You know more than most what this is like. You were Secretary of State for Department of Work and Pensions. It is almost the empire. In fact, I'm surprised you're still alive, Damien. I don't imagine anyone that's ever done that job lives longer than about 2 years afterwards. I mean, it's never ending. It's constant. Everybody wants this. Some agree with that bit. Yes, cut this, but don't cut that, etc. There's no way you can ever appeal. Of all government departments, I've always thought that's a bit of a choker when it comes to appeasement.
Yeah, I mean, the Department of Work and Pensions spends about a third of the total government budget, so it's not surprising it's a difficult job. And and you're also giving money to people who are the most disadvantaged in society and who deserve it. So the crunchy, difficult part of the job is to say we need to set up a set of rules so that those who do deserve benefits, whether it's disability benefits, whether it's in-work benefits, get them, but that we need to be able to say no to people who are just trying it on. And saying no to anyone is difficult, and you have to have an objective set of rules. You have to do the tests properly. And one of the things that I think has come out in the recent debates is that far too many people are able to get assessed over the phone, which, with the best will in the world, is not a very efficient or effective way of testing whether somebody should get benefits or not.
And one of the sort of, let's call it bonkers compromises, it seems, on this, if I've read this correctly, Damien, is that it's likely that the people that might have lost their PIP won't lose it, but anyone, even with identical circumstances as a current claimant, going forward, won't get it. Now, that I can hear legal challenges rattling around on that one for a start, but that seems to be where we're at.
Well, it is, and I can see why you describe it as bonkers, but it's quite often what you have to do, because the alternative, particularly if you're trying to toughen up the rules, as the government is trying to do, is to do what they were originally planning to do, which is to make it retrospective, to say, OK, you've been receiving £100 a week or whatever up to now, but now you as an individual are only going to get £30 a week. And that's what causes the real howls of protest. People miss less what they've never had. So I can see the rationale for it in practical terms, but in the end, I fear that what this rebellion is going to do is to mean that the government has gone through this enormous political turmoil and doesn't actually achieve anything, doesn't have enough spare capacity to help more people into work, which is the whole point, nor actually does it save Rachel Reeves very much money. So altogether, this is a complete organisational disaster for the government.
And talking of organisational disasters, just where we began on this, Damien, I mean, here we are with, we know every now and again a government might have to, eat a bit of humble pie and, possibly modify a policy or put a few changes to it. But I mean, this government seems to have a PhD in this. We're on sort of U-turn number 3 on this, and these aren't like little small areas of policy. They're absolutely huge. Winter fuel, grooming gangs, and now the whole issue with benefits. I mean, it's a horrendous look for Keir Starmer. Has he lost complete control of his party?
Well, he seems to have, yeah, and that's what's very, very strange this early into a government. But if you don't ever stick to your guns, then that's what will happen. And all governments have to take unpopular decisions, and you have to explain them, and you have to make sure you've got some bedrock of support for them inside your own party and outside. But you have to accept that sometimes you're going to do something and people will shout and scream. And if every time they shout and scream you give way, then the next time you do something, they'll shout and scream even louder, and you'll give way more, and people will think, what is the point of this government?
Does it put the Conservatives, just a final question, in a difficult position in terms of being the opposition, given that the Conservatives understandably certainly agree with the notion that this needs to be dealt with? You spoke so much about this at the time. So in principle, they understand the need to cut. So to mount a fundamental argument against it, they can talk about ineptitude, but that's about it, isn't it? The Tories are a little bit kind of in that cul-de-sac we talked of.
Well, I think what opposition should do is stick to their principles, and it is a principle of the Conservative Party that we want to make sure that we don't have too many people on welfare, and that we want to have a fair welfare system, but tough. An entry level to it, if you like, that you make sure that only those who deserve it get it. And I think if the Conservative Party sticks to those principles, which it has done throughout this, then OK, they can't capitalise on every tactical mistake the government makes, but actually that's a principled position. And in opposition, that shows that you have got some principles and strength of purpose. And in the long run, that does you more good than jumping around tactically on every government mistake. If you tried to jump around on every mistake this government makes, you'd be hyperactive in opposition.
Yeah, you certainly would. Yeah, you wouldn't know what you were doing. Listen, always a pleasure, Damien. Nice to have you with us. Damien Green, former Deputy Prime Minister, Conservative Cabinet Minister, and of course he was Secretary of State at the Department of Work and Pensions, which is the area, of course, that this whole issue is absolutely destroying the Labour government at the moment, and looks set to do something similar tomorrow. If there are going to be 50 Labour MPs, my guess is that they'll get that down. I mean, it could be, if they are lucky, they might get that down to possibly 15 to 20. And I think then Keir Starmer will go, OK, it's all about the optics in that game. That I can work with that. There's 15 of my backbenchers. In fact, there's 15 of my backbenchers who are never going to be happy no matter what I do. So I'll never have their support on most things. He can probably work with it. But if 50 of them were to vote against it, that is fundamental and profound. That would be more than a bit of a bruising for Keir Starmer. Tomorrow is the vote. Have they got time to placate the great disgruntled on the green benches? 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to Glastonbury, not literally. Robert's in Hertfordshire. Robert, what have you got for us?
Hi, nice day for it.
Not a bad one.
I'm just about to have a rant, so
go for it.
In respect of Knob Villain and Knee Tremble, okay, because that's what I'm going to call them in
all right.
future.
Okay.
Now, you've not only you, every presenter on all the stations have given far too much publicity. Now, I'm going to ask you something, but I already know the answer. There was a big march in central London on Saturday. It was for the children march in respect of the victims of the grooming gangs. It was massive. Yeah. It was attended by thousands and thousands of people. There wasn't one arrest. They tried to get infiltrated by because my cousin organised it. They tried to get infiltrated by the left wing, probably in the playbook of George Soros. But I bet you didn't know about it, did you?
I did know about it. Yeah, I was aware of it because I do this for a living. But you're right, most people wouldn't have known about it.
Well, you're the only one. I was ready to have a go at you.
No. I knew about it. And it didn't come up today on the agenda, maybe because it happened Saturday. The only problem with protests, Robert, they happen every week in different ways, and they almost never get coverage because it's almost like a private member's bill in Parliament. It's great that people do it, whatever the cause is, but they very rarely get coverage.
Yeah, but this was big, and this this one wasn't organised by Tommy Robinson.
No,
he's organised. He's organising a big one for July. I think it's July the 12th.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be massive.
And those ones I've always mentioned on air when they've happened, because I've mentioned them because of their almost uniqueness in very few arrests. In fact, the people that have got arrested on those things have been a couple of half-wits who've drank a few too many ales. Nothing really more than that. They've been like almost sort of Jubilee days out, rather than protests.
I'll tell you a quick story. Before the lockdown, I was at the Old Bailey for when Tommy Robinson came. I'm not going to really talk about him. And I was a steward. Okay, so I accompanied him along him, and he had so many, people just like you and me, family people. It was peaceful, but in the crowd, this was before masks. In the crowd was 4 or 5 people with masks on, and they were shouting. It's supposed to be Tommy Robinson supporters, and they were shouting and no one knew who they was. So, and they had masks on, right? So definitely left-wing plants. And so everybody, I know a few people, some of the big boys, and they said, I said, no, I ain't got a clue who they are. So no one knew who they was. They was quickly ushered away and taken around the corner. But it just shows you, and the police have done it in the past. They tried to bait them. They tried to do it on Saturday while not leaving enough bollards out. But they done all. The only reason I didn't go is because of my age and because of the heat. I mean, I'm in my 70s. But it was well marshalled. There wasn't one arrest. And they've got it down now to a fine art. They really have. And it should be celebrated. I mean, it should be. They're not trying to kill anybody. They're not inciting violence. They're just marching against the... and there was a lot of victims of the grooming gangs marching alongside them. And what was unique about it, it was called the Football Lads March. All the football supporters from all over, no fighting, no rivalry, they all got together. I thought that was really good. I thought that was, quite...
Even Arsenal fans, good Lord.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I jest.
There was only one there because I didn't go, QPR.
That's all right. No, I get it. Listen, Robert, you make a good point. I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much, Robert in Hertfordshire, 0344 499 1000. A load more messages. We'll get to some messages as well in a couple of moments' time. More calls on the way as well. This is Talk.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Reg says, could you imagine on Sunday afternoon when Rod Stewart was doing his set at Glastonbury if he suddenly started chanting, "Don't pay your TV licence, don't pay your TV licence." Within 10 seconds, they'd have cut him off. I'd like to think they... Thank you, Reg, for that. I'd like to think they'd have let good old Rod... How many outfit changes? He does rock an outfit, doesn't he, Rod Stewart? He does. I don't know what's going on with that fella. He's 80. He looks incredible. Debbie Harry is 80 tomorrow. She looks incredible. There is a certain... You can get... Even when Ronnie Wood came on, considering the life that Ronnie Wood has led... I think he's teetotaler now. He's had too many health scares. But I actually thought he looked pretty good, actually. I know he's got an ageing rocker look about him, but even taking all that into account. And that's kind of what you want to see, you know, those... It's a bit like when Elton John did his set a couple of years ago now, which was just, you know, utterly astonishing to see. Hit after hit and just an absolute instinctive way of performing in that setting, because they've done it, not just for years, decades. They know their terrain. A couple of chancers from Ipswich pitch up and go, I know what we'd do. We'd do should we do the Palestinian thing? Yeah, then we can hope some Jews die as well. That'd be good, wouldn't it? They haven't got a clue, these characters. This from Nick, who says Lucy Connolly was put away because she was supposedly right-wing. Bob Villan will not get away with it because he will get away with it because he was at a left-wing event, at an event run and owned by left-wingers and televised by a left-wing channel. Although I'm sure Tim Davey would have something to be said about the left-wing thing. Thank you, Nick, for that. And Richard in Cumbria, very simple point, something we've all pondered on. Why don't the BBC just put in a 15-second delay on outputs from Glastonbury so that everything can be checked before transmission? Simple as that. It's exactly how radio works. It's exactly how our YouTube feed works right now. If somebody says something you wouldn't say to your nana, it can be removed, and that's it, really. It's as simple as that. They would probably say that, there's some technical reason why we can't do that. I don't think there is, because I can give you a technical reason why you could do it, because right now we are also streaming online and it's functioning in a delayed capacity. So it can happen. And that technology, by the way, is not exactly new. They've been able to do that for yonks. Greg is in Windsor on this point. Greg, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Can I just compliment the level of journalism that I'm listening to on various radio stations, Talk Radio, and I won't name the other one, but the quality of journalism is what journalism used to be. So I grew up in South Africa in an apartheid regime, which was despicable and horrible. My mother was born in Southall. She always told me about Speaker's Corner. She always told me about freedom of speech.
Yeah.
When I arrived in the UK on the 20th of November 1986, it was a weekday, I went to Speaker's Corner because all I wanted to do was understand what freedom of speech was. I still go up there regularly. We have a channel that we discuss different worldviews with people. But what I'm seeing coming out of the intellectual capacity for human beings and the integrity of journalism is really it's really saddening. It's deeply it reminds me of the old apartheid regime in South Africa, where you weren't allowed to. There was a newspaper in South Africa that had a blank front page once because they weren't allowed to write the truth. And because they weren't allowed to write the truth, they'd rather have a blank page. And I can actually see that newspaper.
Yeah.
It was about 1983. I can see it. I went and bought a copy to support them because I would die for freedom of speech.
Sure.
So as much as you have people shouting out mindless slogans, people don't seem to be thinking anymore. And by thinking, I mean doing proper research, proper journalism, sourcing the figures, sourcing the stats, checking other people's points of view, and getting material and data that is cohesive, and convincing people through a narrative that is actually grounded in I want to use the word, I want to speak simply, but the narrative is not grounded in factual research and good journalism, it's grounded in mindless slogans.
You're absolutely right. People love a headline and not the detail. We see this, I suppose social media does play a part in engineering much of this, but as you rightly say, this predates social media. You were seeing, this in South Africa. Social media, of course, who often people on it call themselves the new news. This is where the real news happens. And, of course, it's anything but. Sometimes good news is on there, of course. I don't mean good news as in happy. I mean accurate news. But mostly it's opinion. And there's nothing wrong with opinion, by the way, but it should be made clear it's opinion. And it's never sourced. It's never double-checked. It's never fact-checked. You'd be fired out of a cannon if you worked in a newsroom and did that. But that's the place we're in. When it comes to freedom of speech, though, Greg, what is that line between freedom of speech and hate speech?
Well, for example, if anyone takes the time to Google Hitler meeting with the Grand Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini in 1941, and for them calling for the extermination of Jews, that would have been in the newspapers. It would have been in the media, and that would have been reported on. So I hate what was said at Glastonbury. I hate calls for violence. I think it's despicable. But personally, I watched the interview on Nana Aquina on another news channel this week, and they had a pro-Palestine presenter there who didn't have any facts, who was just saying, this is genocide, this is genocide, this is genocide.
Yeah, well, it's the headline thing again, isn't it? No facts.
The headline thing, it's the catchphrase, and I've looked at the psychology behind this and why people use this, and it's because it's so simple, it works.
Yeah.
So for me, when you talk about freedom of speech, I love freedom of speech, even if I violently disagree with people.
So is there any line for you, Greg? Because earlier we spoke to a lawyer who said anyone's freedom of speech that starts off with the words death to is not freedom of speech. You're in another territory then.
You're right. It isn't freedom of speech. I think it warrants conversation, and it warrants who's going to expose that freedom of speech. But for example, what you never hear about on the media, Ian, and I really, really appreciate it if you just listen to this for 15 seconds. Have you ever heard the words uti possidetis juris?
Go on.
Are you familiar with that expression?
No.
So I only discovered this a couple of weeks ago when a lawyer...
I'm assuming this is a Latin phrase, right?
It's a Latin phrase for a law, and it's all about the definition of what happens when a commonwealth gets their land back. So the League of Nations and the United Nations work on uti possidetis juris to enshrine what they're going to do with giving people their land back, giving people their commonwealth back, to enshrine it in law. So in 1948, Israel was a sovereign nation enshrined in law. They weren't illegal occupiers.
No.
They weren't at any time trying to commit a genocide. This is easy for anyone to find.
Yeah.
And so the complexity that exists around the law is one thing, but for people to completely disregard it and say that Israel are the occupiers is a lie.
It's a rather big one as well, for that matter. But as you say, you've just got to keep saying occupied, 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 bullies, genocide. Keep wheeling that out, and enough people will jump on board. Listen, Greg, I have to move for no other reason than we've overshot on time and we've got to cross live to our next guest in just a second. But you've been brilliant. Really lovely to speak to you. Do call again as well. And I love the passion on free speech. Just very briefly, Dave says a few years ago, Bob Vylan performed at a Beautiful Days festival in Devon. The lack of respect shown to us festival staff was disgusting. They called for the crowd to storm the stage, something which they did. We had no idea what was about to happen and if we were safe. Thankfully, Beautiful Days is a very good-natured event, so it all went okay. It was kind of a posh storming of the stage. But it was very worrying for a few minutes. They made some hideous statements about the royal family and the Queen being a terrorist. Utterly disgusting people. I really hope their career is over. And you're right. I mean, even just what you've told us there, Dave. So they have got previous in this kind of, like, just the idea that you become sort of, you know, rebellious and tear it up kind of for the sake of it, it's a bit like trying to fake eccentricity. I knew a guy once who said in an office, I'm going to be so eccentric. And everybody pointed out that by definition of you having to design your idea of eccentricity, you cease to become eccentric. And it's a similar thing with it. If you have to kind of manufacture your indignation and have this kind of synthetic outrage to everything, I mean, the Queen being a terrorist being one of them, you're either mad and stupid, and I'm willing to believe that Bob Vylan are probably a bit mad and certainly stupid, but you cease to be you're not the Sex Pistols, mate. You know, it's not, you know, the Grundy interview the Pistols did when the F-bomb was dropped. That was, you know, that was rebellion at the time. Haircuts and fashion and everything that went with it, Vivienne Westwood, you know, game-changing. You can look at that as an era, and it's worthy of a bit of pursuit if you've never looked into it. These are a couple of chances from Ipswich who know diddly, frankly. It's a very, very different version of rebellion. Just say some words and be offensive. That should work. Storm the stage. Hey, isn't that good? 0344 499 1000. We're live at Wimbledon to get the latest on not just the tennis, but the weather as well. Details coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 4. Now, Wimbledon has kicked off in, I think the phrase is blistering style, the hottest opening day on record. We're looking at around about 30 degrees here. British qualifier Oliver Tarvett ranked 733rd, smashed expectations with a dream debut, defeating the Swiss player Leandro Ridi in straight sets. There's 23 British players in the singles draw. The home crowd is ready to rally behind their stars as the action heats up on and off the courts. God, if you're queuing trying for some last-minute centre court tickets or whatever they give you, good luck with that in this heat. Let's speak to Talk reporter live in Wimbledon. Amelia Beltrao is with us. Amelia, afternoon to you.
A very good afternoon to you, Ian.
Do you know what I love about when you see somebody who's 733rd, when their ranking is 733rd? There's always some half-wit in the pub who goes, yeah, I could beat them. And you think, yeah. I'll tell you what, do you know what a 733rd ranked player looks like when they're on court? You wouldn't see the tennis ball coming at you. These are still some of the world's best, and that's what we're witnessing. And a record number of Brits, Amelia.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to be playing in this heat either, so I'll give it to the man in the pub to have a go at that game.
Absolutely.
What I love about the story about Oliver Tarvett is he's actually in his last year at uni in America, and because he is bound by contract there until he's finished uni, he actually can't accept the opening prize money for just getting into the first round. So all players at this tournament will get paid $66,000. Poor little Ollie could only get $7,300 because that's all he's capped to get. Yeah,
that's outrageous, but that's part of that's just like a little rule that's in place.
Game.
That's the game. But of course, if he moves through, that can change, right?
Yeah, but of course he's got a very tough opponent. He's got to be facing defending champion Carlos Alcaraz in the next round.
Oh, for God's sake, how did that happen? I mean, he's probably thinking of all the players.
Of all the players, yeah, it's the same with the likes. I think all the Brits have got pretty tough draws. So if Emma Raducanu wins later, she'll be facing a former Wimbledon champion as well, the 2023 champion, as well as that. If she would then win that game, she would then be facing the world #1. So just an example of how tough the draw really is for the Brits. But of course, it's still an amazing story, having 23 Brits, the most amount of Brits in 41 years.
Yeah, where are the real eyes? I'm tempted to say, obviously, Jack Draper. I mean, eyes are on Jack for many reasons, of course, but in terms of on the court, I mean, he had a bit of a stinker at Queen's, didn't quite do what we thought he was going to do, but here he is. Is it his to win this year? He's got some tough opposition out there.
Again, it's going to be a tough draw for him. I think it all comes down to how well he fares with the crowd expectation, obviously as the home favourite, and considering how drastically he's improved in the last year, there will be a lot of hope riding on him, a lot of pressure. But also, if he does continue to do well, he will have to face Djokovic in one of the later rounds, before then going on to having to face either Carlos or Sinner in the semi-final. So it's a tough run for him as well.
Yeah, but, Djokovic is an old geezer these days, so, I mean,
He is an old geezer, but he says this could be his time. He's always said that he wants to get that magic 25th number, that record 8th title here at Wimbledon, and he thinks this would be the place to do it. We're still a bit unsure about what his retirement plans are, because he kind of hinted at the French Open that was going to be his last French Open, but he's also recently said he wants to defend his gold medal at the Olympics in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So so time will tell because he's 38. I mean, he's the same age as when Rafa retired. I think Roger was 41 when he retired. He's getting on a bit, but you never know. Stranger things have happened.
It's not like he's got to do a crowdfunder for his retirement, is it? I mean, he's done all right out of the game.
I think he's going to be okay. I think any of them, they're getting 66 grand in the first game. I think most of them are going to be all right.
Absolutely right. It's interesting. Just back to Jack Draper, when he was knocked out at Queen's, of course, his opponent said to the crowd, look, I know this is the guy you wanted to win. That's going to be really compounded at Wimbledon, though, isn't it? Because, Andy Murray always had that moment. The crowd being behind you is a vital part of this game. It's a vital part of any sport, of course, but it's certainly in the intimacy, if that's one way to look at it, of a tennis court and the crowds and the biggest tennis tournament in the world, Wimbledon. I mean, that's a real moment, isn't it? So, I mean, Draper will have the wind behind him in that respect.
Of course, and it all just, I guess it's sink or swim at that rate, really. You're going to be utilising that crowd, that momentum behind you to really push you, inspire your tennis and play the best you can on the court, or is it going to get to you and you then crumble and you can't actually do the best you can?
Yeah, I remember Andy Murray's first Wimbledon. I don't know if you remember this or not, but this is when he went to, I think he went to a 5-setter and got cramp in about the 5th. He'd never played at that level for that length of time. And, of course, that's just an experience thing. Draper, of course, has that experience now. He's not going to be caught out like that. But, as you say, something can happen on the day that you could never have imagined. He's up against, potentially, as he moves through, some pretty tough opposition. But he'll have the crowd behind him. He'll have the nation behind him as well. And, we need a British winner again, don't we?
We do. I think we do. I mean, Draper's still kind of very early on. He still needs to be developing a bit more experience. So going on to these tournaments like Wimbledon, learning from them. Like we saw with Andy Murray, obviously when it was the heartbreak in 2011 and he lost to Roger Federer, you really felt that gut-wrenching pain that he didn't get it, and then learning from it, getting it the following year. So I think it is going to be a lot of experience and learning for Draper in this tournament in particular, depending on how far he gets into the tournament.
We were talking about the weather earlier, and I made the point, I think you'd probably back me up on this, Amelia. Look, these players, when they go, oh, it's a Brit in 34 degrees, the likes of Andy Murray, Henman, they didn't do all their training years in this country. They're used to it. They know that, and all those top players are aware that playing 3 sets, potentially 5 sets in 30 degrees is something they have previously done. It's not necessarily ideal for them. So we know about the players, but the crowds, if you're sitting on the sunny side, I mean, this is not a comfortable afternoon for you.
not. Like, I'm very fortunate. I've had an umbrella keeping me in the shade today. I don't know how they're faring out on court 1 or centre court, because of course you want to stick it out for as long as you can, but it is hot. So I was speaking to a lot of people in the queue this morning, and it seems to be the trick for them is obviously water, hats, maybe a towel, and it seems to be a lot of Pimm's for them.
Yeah, Pimm's is always the answer, frankly. Wimbledon did say to people, don't come and queue for tickets today, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have spoken to some people who wanted to try and get tickets for tomorrow, so they're going to be doing the scary idea of actually camping tonight, which I think might be worse than last night for them. But yeah, they've just basically said if you're going to try and come in the morning, most of the people I spoke to, they got done at 5 a.m. and they would only really be guaranteed tickets to courts 2, 3 if they're lucky. Whereas if you were to then queue today, it would be for tomorrow, but you could maybe get centre in court 1 tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, I love tennis, but 5 a.m. If you told me that McEnroe was back, I might come out for 5 a.m., but that's what it would take.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were just coming down here, they set up camp, and they literally would just have a 2-hour kit. But then they said, actually, once it got to like 7, 8 in the morning, that's when the heat actually starts creeping in.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I don't think I can be sitting in this anymore.
Absolutely. Listen, Amelia, enjoy the rest of the day. What a place to be reporting down there at the iconic Wimbledon, the biggest tennis tournament on the planet. Amelia Beltrao, talks reporter, live there down at SW19. Thank you to her. More on that. And as the day progresses, Emma Raducanu playing a little later. I mean, that's going to be, all eyes on that. But, she had that moment. She had that US Open moment. Can she build on that? It was a couple of years ago now, if you remember. We'd be behind her. Let's hope she does it. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Let's go to Les in Birmingham. Les, how you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. Very hot, but I'm okay.
That's all right. Glad you're keeping well. Nice to have you on with us. What are you thinking?
Okay, well, I just wanted to point out the irony. The whole issue in Gaza and Israel kicked off, if that's the right word, 18 months ago because some people at a concert were kidnapped, raped, tortured and shot dead. Okay, but there's some people, the irony is that some people at a concert had forgotten all about that. So
yes,
my ironic question is, just supposing half those people at Glastonbury, I mean, I know it's different numbers and stuff were
no, but you're right. I mean, the idea that this just shows you, this pair of characters on stage were as thick as mince. Did they not even think, that here I am announcing death to the very people that attempted to assist those that had been and go on to try and fight for those people that lost their lives at a music festival. So we're going to make that announcement at a music festival. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
I know, it's just crazy, isn't it? Yeah, and just to carry it forward, if those people at Glastonbury were kidnapped, and I'm not having a go at the Welsh, I promise you, but just say taken to Wales, and the perpetrators hid under churches and schools and hospitals, would they be saying the British Army or whatever can't go in and try and release them? I mean, I don't think people are thinking the story through properly, are they?
100%. There we are. Les, thank you very much indeed for that. You make a solid point, and certainly the setting of a music festival where this chance happened on Saturday can't be dismissed as just, isn't that a weird coincidence? I mean, goodness me. So these are two guys that worked this out beforehand. Yeah, let's do this music festival. Where all those bits... Peter Cox says, afternoon Ian. Oh, sorry, it's Phil, actually. Phil from Hertfordshire regarding Glastonbury. It was quite evident, but there were Palestinian flags around in that crowd before the event took place. People walking around with those flags. The organisers knew that Palestine support, there was Palestine support in the crowd. Security could have nipped it in the bud if they wanted to stop any eventuality. They didn't. They allowed it to happen. I'll leave it there. And one from Phil in Thurrock. I reckon the BBC production team should get sacked. The bands should get fined. Glastonbury should get fined and lose their licence. No more. I pay to support the BBC. We normal Brits and licence payers have been brought into disrepute. Obscene, says Phil in Thurrock. Thank you for that, Phil. We'll have more in a couple of moments' time from you. Lots to talk about, including, of course, a reminder of what you would call, talking of music, the reunion of the century is just around the corner. This is less than 3 weeks away. We're talking Oasis. They're back. They're in Manchester on July the 19th. Tickets are, well, you wouldn't get them unless you talk to us, because we've got a pair. They could be yours. Tickets for Oasis, Manchester, July the 19th. And I say this because I take a breath, not just that, you get a night put up in a decent hotel, plus, and this is the absolute beauty, £5,000 in your back pocket. 5,000 Oasis tickets, hotel, £5,000, completely tax-free, by the way. You want the details? You want to know more? You want to know how you can get your hands on all of this? Have a listen.
On iArcade, you have to be over 18 to enter the UK, excluding Northern Ireland, for the chance to win a pair of tickets to the most electrifying rock and roll reunion of the century. A hotel stay and £5,000 spending money. Text the word WIN to 83338 by Monday the 7th of July at 11 p.m. and you'll be entered into the draw to go supersonic this summer. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission or post your name and number to Oasis Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP. To arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of July.
This is a TalkSport limited promotion run on TalkSport, Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full T's and C's at talksport.com. Good luck, yeah? Sorted.
They promised stability.
They said the grown-ups are back in charge.
I was so happy you just couldn't believe it.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
I mean, you couldn't really scrape together a worse gang of misfits to run a dog kennel.
Broken promises.
Billions blown.
Botched U-turns.
And Britain is burning.
One of the most immeasurably eventful.
1 year in power.
And Britain in freefall. It's just been a disaster.
1 year of chaos.
Friday, 4th of July.
9 p.m.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 10 to 4. Wow, Jez is here at 4 o'clock. We're talking to him before the news. Ben is in Cirencester. Ben, big fans of Bob Vylan, I understand. Is that right, Ben?
Not quite, I'd say, to be honest with you.
What have you got for us?
I had the misfortune of seeing him live. A couple of years ago, I went and saw Billy Idol, who was doing a thing with a couple of guys from the Sex Pistols called Generation Sex at Civic Town Hall Centre in Wolverhampton. And it was a very similar kind of thing. The amount of sort of just hate-filled spewing out, give an idiot a microphone, and this is what happens, unfortunately. They were singing all sorts of things, chanting "Death to King Charles, death."
Isn't it a bit of a sort of parody of an angry band? I mean,
Yeah. They claim to be. They're not. There's nothing punk about them. Punks aren't like that. Nothing.
No,
to do with
not
whatsoever.
at all. No. I think Susie and the Banshees can sleep well at night, don't you?
I think they'd be all right. Yeah. But just disgraceful behaviour, really. And to be honest, there are a couple of middle class kids basically just being idiots and chanting to sheep.
Yeah, I'd love to know a bit more about their background. I did try to investigate it because that's what I want to find out, whether they kind of actually come from, a nice moneyed family somewhere.
I think they do. I think his sister's a lawyer.
Is that right? Well, they might need one.
I think you might. Yeah, so, no, not a fan at all.
There we go. We'll watch with interest. Ben, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that. Julian says, great show. Bob and Bobby hate speech, don't even know how trousers work. So how can they be taken seriously? Pair of bitter lemons. I love that. Pair of bitter lemons. I don't know what the deal was with wearing a tennis outfit on stage. I mean, he took it off. He's a fairly ripped guy. That's the only thing I'll give him. He's clearly done. He's been down the gym, as our Bob. He knows how to look good. But unfortunately, he needs to exercise his brain. Because as I said earlier, the one remaining brain cell he had, he spewed over to the crowd, who started chanting along. So much so that it could be heard at Michael Eavis's mansion. Socialists love a mansion. And he's got one as well. Jeremy Corbyn grew up in a bit of a mansion as well. I can't remember, was it Staffordshire? It's a beautiful, I think, 16 bedroom place. Very nice. Jason says, Bob Villan, his performance was incitement to cause death and injury. Hopefully we can replace Lucy Connolly in prison. But we know he won't. Same as Lineker. Two-tier Keir, says Jason Flynn in Southampton. Stephen's in. That's interesting. Stephen's in Southampton. There we go. Afternoon to you, Stephen.
Afternoon, Ian. Yeah, afternoon.
What have you got for us?
Well, I was just wondering how the man himself, Bob Dylan, feels about this. Bearing in mind that he's a very wealthy man, bordering on a billionaire, and he's also of Jewish stock.
Yes, and he's a Jewish billionaire, so he must be their worst nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see two New York high-profile lawyers knock this character's door with a writ.
Because I think Bob could probably pay for a good lawyer, don't you?
Exactly. I mean, he's 150 million records sold worldwide.
Yeah.
He's got the money to do this, and let's not forget he also brought up in a world of peace and love, in the 60s, and I don't think he'd like this being. And let's not forget, it's just one letter that's they're obviously having a go at Bob Dylan. It's just one. It's not Pascal Dylan. It's Bob Dylan. So
yeah, it's definitely a play on words.
It's a play on words, and I don't think he's going to like this. Like I say, being Jewish.
It does. Well, had they not done that whole kind of anti-Semitic thing, we might not be having this conversation, Steve.
Well,
we might just go.
We would.
We just go. Oh, it's Bob Dylan. It sounds a bit like Bob Dylan. It's just a play on words. But now you're forced to kind of wonder: is this like because they obviously don't like Jews? They made that quite clear with what they said. And here's a great example in their own name.
Yeah. So let's have, maybe he might slap a writ on them.
We will. Yeah, we'll watch with interest. Like it, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed for that. Reg says the Ipswich rappers. One of them has got a double-barrel surname, and I'm betting you he went to a private school. That's not punk. That's posh. Yeah, he's got a double-barrel. I can't wait to find out what he's about, this character. Anne in Archway says one of the dense duo who was spouting support for Islam Hamas has a daughter at school. I wonder how she'll feel living under Islam, says Anne. This from Julian. Great show, Bob and Bobby. Oh, I think I read that one, didn't I? Pair of lemons, indeed. Betty says they would have seen all the background graphics during the rehearsal. They knew, and some young woke producer made a decision to air the Save Gaza bit. Plus, they have a delay on all live broadcasts. Yeah, but not on this. They didn't have a delay. That was the That's where some heads are going to surely roll.
Don't be ridiculous. No heads will roll.
I had something to tell you, actually. And it's just...
I had the Saturday, which makes that as bad as... I went to my son's school that I'm going to name after 4 o'clock and sat in a tent with 1,000 parents, private education. That was my choice as a parent. And they employed somebody who apparently is on Radio 4 and does the news there. I don't know his name, Andy Zoltman or something, bald head and spiky hair. First 3 minutes of the speech were quite funny. And then he proceeded in front of 1,000 parents and children to say, and I quote, well, let's talk about the reality of life. Donald Trump's a complete disgrace. Your parents and your grandparents that voted in Brexit to leave Europe have let you down. This is about net zero. It's about a Labour Party trying to do things that are great. When you think about working, I sat there.
Wow.
Honestly, I sat there, and my wife, who you know quite well, said, if he was staying, I'd pull him out. Unbelievable, one-sided. I was amazed, right? And I'm sat there in the front row looking at this bloke thinking, so you're supportive of everything that hates this type of education, fee paying, and yet you're taking a fee, aren't you, to slag off and put everything you think? I was raging.
Do you know what I'm most disappointed to hear?
Raging.
There's 2 things that disappoint me, because one, the week before I also sat in one of those marquees at a prize-giving end-of-term thing, which was, but there was a really nice guy that gave a speech. Andy Zoltman used to come on our show on talkTV years ago.
I promise you on my life.
He just told, there he is.
He was really, really funny for 3 minutes, and then he literally started...
Went into it.
Now, there's nothing wrong with having a different view, but I'm sat there thinking, so this is what you're telling children without any other balance, yeah?
Yeah.
You're not telling them about, you know... He talked about grooming... I mean, the whole thing was like that. It's like, what?
Wow, where's he going with this?
BBC. Left wing, and then you get home and you read that Glastonbury thing, and I'd just like to say 2 words to anybody. Lucy Connolly, that piece of crap should be in prison. Why wasn't he taken off the stage?
Police are investigating.
Of course they're investigating.
They're investigating. He's going to the chiller.
I've started before I've started. I really was raging.
Let's start now. Forget the news. Cancel the news.
I had to phone Mike Graham in the car. I was that raging, and even he was talking me down. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what they're telling children in whatever type of education,
yes.
What balance is that?
Well, there is.
Does that make us... I mean, he literally called everybody far right that voted to leave the European Union.
Was he meant to be, like, the guest speaker as a
just
former...
supposed to have a laugh, and it was a laugh.
Was he a former pupil?
Was he Eckers like a former pupil, ginger, bald-headed? Honestly, I was raging. Honestly, and my wife said, there's an example of why you should homeschool if schools are